Good morning. We are live. We are live in the courtroom of Chad Daybell, day 4 of his trial in Idaho.
Okay, let's go on the record on case CR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. Continuing with the state's case in chief, we had a witness on the stand, Ms. Heidemann, yesterday that I believe will be continuing with testimony today. I'll note that the prosecutors are present as well as the defendant and defense counsel. Is the state ready to proceed with further evidence this morning?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is the defense ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, let's go ahead and have the jurors brought in, please.
I hope you're all feeling well today.
Oh, okay. I won't touch it. Thank you.
How are you feeling today, Stacy? Chad in a white. He has chosen today the white t-shirt. I'm sorry, the white shirt. The white collared shirt. He sure does, Stacy. So does his tragedy perving friend. Lots of comments on my video from yesterday from her supporters. That's okay. It's to be expected. Good morning. Good morning. You're welcome. I'm glad you're getting better.
All right.
I just think it's funny that, channels like his and hers with so many subscribers could feel affected by a channel
The jury
with
present
less
and
than
accounted.
10,000 subscribers.
All right, thank you. Please be seated. All right, good morning, everyone. We're on the record on case CR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. The state is present. Ms. Blake was conducting direct of the witness yesterday and will be continuing with the same witness this morning. Is the state ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll note also the defense is present as well, the defendant and counsel, Mr. Pryor. The court will note, again, there is a courtroom conduct order in effect, and I appreciate those in attendance adhering to the terms of that courtroom conduct order. We did have a few members of the public yesterday that were not permitted to re-enter the courtroom later in the afternoon for not complying with that. Again, today it will be in effect, and I appreciate everyone in the audience here following those admonitions in that order. In addition, I'll note that this trial is being live streamed We are showing that directly through the court's official channel, which is the best signal if anyone is following the trial through that for public access. And no, we did confirm that the signal coming through off the court's website has the best quality if anybody's interested in following it that way. A few other things I'll note that the jurors are all present today. The court has received the declarations or acknowledgements that they followed the court's admonishing instructions. And so all are present and seated, and I appreciate you continuing to follow the court's admonition at the conclusion of trial each day. Ms. Heidman's on the stand at this point and is still under oath for testimony. And I will just inquire to make sure you didn't do anything to go back and review or look at any other testimony before returning today. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
Okay, thank you. So we'll conclude or continue then with direct examination of the witness. And as you testify, Ms. Blake and Ms. Heidman, please talk right into the microphone so we get a good, clear audio. And with that in mind, you can continue with your direct, Ms. Blake.
It sounds like
Thank you, Your Honor.
probably had devices.
Ms.
for-
Heidemann, we left off yesterday going through phone attribution, but just since we had a break, will you remind the jury where you're employed?
The Federal Bureau of Investigation,
And what is your job title?
tactical specialist.
And in assisting with this investigation regarding the missing children, did that investigation ultimately expand into more than just missing children?
It did.
And what did it expand to include?
Into the deaths of Charles Vallow, JJ Vallow, Tylee Ryan, Tammy Daybell, and shooting attempts of Brandon Boudreaux and Tammy Daybell.
And as part,
Tammy, yes.
as part of your role in the investigation, were you tasked with looking at some Google searches done in association with a Gmail associated with Chad Daybell and a Gmail address associated with Lori Vallow?
Yes,
And did you in fact look at some searches that were conducted by both of those two
yes.
or their emails?
Their email accounts, correct.
And in looking through those, did you focus on a specific time date?
Yes.
And what was that?
In general, from October 2018 through January 2020.
And was it a similar time frame that you looked at in the phone attributions as well?
Yes,
In looking through those searches, did you prepare an exhibit today?
yes,
And did you prepare that exhibit based off your searches and what you reviewed in relation to the evidence or discovery?
yes, I did.
Do you believe that that would assist in your testimony today?
Yes,
And do you believe it would assist the jurors in understanding as well?
I do.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask that the witness be shown what's been marked as State's Exhibit 184A.
Good morning, everyone.
I do have a copy for the court. I gave counsel a copy yesterday. Similar to the exhibit yesterday, there is actually a thumb drive that contains this actual exhibit, but these are printout slides from a PowerPoint.
Okay.
I will note that the Karen Reed trial starts today. They are in jury selection, so not a lot of court action, but jury selection starts today. If anything significant happens,
Yes, sir.
we will update during the
And if
break.
you could look at those pages. Is that an accurate depiction of the PowerPoint that you put together?
It is.
And when we look at that, we talked about the time frame that you focused on. During the time you were looking at these searches, were the children still missing?
Yes,
And in part of what you were looking for, were you still focused on attempting to locate the children or learn information about them?
yes,
Does this accurately reflect a summary of the searches that you pulled out as relevant at that point in time?
yes,
Do you believe these are still relevant?
I do.
Your Honor, I would move for the admission of State's Exhibit 184A.
Any
Judge,
objection?
as a summary, there won't be any objection.
All right, 184A is admitted, and again, to be clear, that's not the printed off sheets. That will be the PowerPoint on a file contained on a thumb drive, correct, Ms. Blake?
Correct, Your Honor.
All right, it is admitted.
I know, right,
And
Hippie?
Your Honor, may I publish to the jury?
Yes.
You know, I don't think the Karen Reed trial would be high profile if it weren't for Turtle Boy's shenanigans, though. It's not like there's a major this case is high profile because of the nature of the crimes and everything. Her case is much more, you know, I hate to say this, you know, justice for John, her victim. But it's not an unusual case. You know what I'm saying? It's not
Sorry, my computer is thinking a moment.
momentous case like this one is. So to me, it just shows how social media will hype up a
On
completely
this
normal
first
case.
slide,
It's
can you
amazing.
walk us through what we're seeing here?
Yes, this is a summary of search activity of interest observed in an account titled chad.daybell@gmail.com. We started the review on October 1st, 2018 through the end of the production when legal process ended.
And do you recall approximately when that would have been?
I don't remember off the top of my head what the search warrant dates were, no.
Is your recollection that they would have been around the same time as that phone attribution?
Probably pretty close, yes.
So again, when the children were still missing.
Correct.
And if we look at that first search there, and I say search, let me back up. When we look at the first date there, can you walk us through what those searches were?
Yes. On January 28th, 2019, there was searches for Ned Snyder, 1996 death, Louisiana. Ned Snyder, Louisiana. Ned Snyder, Louisiana, born 1951, died 1996. And bodies possessed after original occupant dies.
And in looking at that, there's some semicolons. Why are those there?
They were separate searches, or the way that the return comes in, it might have been a search and then visiting a site, for example. So I didn't separate out which ones. These just appear in the search history under different times, different searches, but on the same date.
So several searches done on the same date for Ned Schneider.
Correct.
Why did that stick out to you?
That is connected to other portions of this investigation, wherein Charles Vallow makes a comment right around this time.
Judge, I'm going to object at this point.
Basis.
Well, it's hearsay, and in addition, Judge, there's no foundation to establish where this witness gained that information. So at the very least, I'd like some foundation. And then in addition, there's also a hearsay argument as well.
It's sustained on grounds of hearsay, calls for hearsay.
Thank you, Your Honor. As part of this investigation, we talked earlier that originally you get involved in looking for missing children.
Correct.
And at some point that expanded to include other acts.
Yes.
And you mentioned previously that one of those acts was the killing of Charles Vallow.
Correct.
Through your investigation, did you come to learn anything in relation to Charles Vallow and Ned Snyder?
Yes.
What did you learn in relation to the investigation?
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. There hasn't been sufficient foundation to establish how this witness learned of this information as it relates to Charles Vallow.
I will.
Investigation, did you review multiple documents?
I did.
Did you review multiple reports?
Yes,
Did you review phone data that was recovered?
I did.
In your review of reports and phone data, did you learn anything regarding the name Ned Schneider?
I did.
Did you learn of the importance of the name Ned Schneider?
Yes.
And what did you learn regarding the name Ned Snyder?
Judge, again, I'm going to renew my objection on the basis of foundation. The only reference to knowledge was from reports or documents that are unidentified. If this witness is going to start relaying information about what she learned, I would think at least I'd be entitled to know what document she's referring to, where this information was gained from.
And Your Honor, may I respond?
Go ahead, Ms. Blake.
Your Honor, I think under the collective knowledge doctrine, she's already talked about it being a joint investigation, that she reviewed and discussed the matter. And in relation to hearsay, it's not coming in for the truth of the matter. It's coming in for why she does what she does and why it's relevant to her through the investigation.
I am going to overrule the objection and allow it to be answered at this point with sufficient foundation.
Thank you. What did you learn in relation to the relevance of Ned Snyder and Charles Vallow?
In reviewing police reports from Chandler Police Department and body cam footage, I believe from Gilbert Police Department, Charles Vallow makes comments that his wife, Lori Vallow, was referring to him as variations on the name Ned Schneider. Additionally, the name Ned and variations of the name Ned Schneider appear in Lori Vallow's iCloud accounts, again, in reference to Charles Vallow.
And then there's also one on there, bodies possessed after original occupant dies. What was it about that stood out to you?
The concept of possession is sort of prevalent through this investigation. This is, I believe, the first time we start seeing it, wherein Charles Vallow has become possessed by an entity named Ned. So again, I spoke yesterday about there being a lot of aliases in this case with Chad and Lori, but also with some of the victims in this case where they are possessed by entities and therefore then being referred to by these names, Ned being one of them for Charles.
And then the next search on there, can you read the date and what that search was?
January 31st, 2019, Ned Schneider, Louisiana, obituary, 1997.
And did that stand out to you for the same reasons you've just explained?
It did.
And then the next one on there, can you read that and what the date and what the search was?
March 6th, 2019, June 26th, star sign, are Cancer and Leo compatible? May 4 sign, Taurus and Leo compatible.
And when we're looking at this one, what stood out about this particular search?
Lori Vallow's birthday is June 26th, making her a Cancer. May 4th was Tammy's birthday, making her a Taurus, and Chad Daybell's birthday is August 11th, which makes him a Leo. And then the search of the compatibility between those signs.
And on March 6th of 2019, do you know if Tammy Daybell was still alive?
She was.
And you indicated Chad and Lori had met approximately when?
October 26, 2018.
And looking at the next search, can you read the date and talk a little bit about that one?
May 5th, 2019, Malachite and eBay Malachite jewelry.
And what stood out about that to you?
Chad and Lori eventually ended up purchasing malachite stone wedding bands.
And again, May 5th, was Tammy still alive?
She was.
What stood out about, or excuse me, on the next one, can you say the date and what that search was?
June 1st, 2019, Iplos.
And what caught your attention with regard to that search?
In reviewing the iCloud data and seeing text messages, it becomes apparent that Hiplos is another entity name for Charles Vallow, replacing Ned.
So both Ned Schneider and Hiplos or Iplos are names associated with Charles Vallow.
Correct.
And on June 1st of 2019, do you know if Charles Vallow was still alive?
He was.
How about the next search, the date and that search?
July 9th, 2019, when you surprise someone with accusations.
What caught your attention in relation to that search?
That search was conducted 2 days before Charles was shot and killed.
And then the next one, the one on September 8th, 2019, you could talk about that search.
SSW wind, and what is the definition of SSW direction?
What caught your attention with that wind search?
That search occurred the last day of Tylee Ryan's sighting, and we believe she was burned and buried on his property the following day.
We talked a little bit before, there were other searches in relation to this email. Is that accurate?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
In your review of those, were there any other searches for wind direction?
Not that I saw.
So this was not a common search done by or associated with this email address.
No.
And then the last one on there, if you could say the date and what that one is.
October 8th, 2019, Rhode Island area code.
And what was it about this search that drew your attention?
As mentioned yesterday, there were numerous phones involved in this investigation. On October 8th, 2019, the 401 number we spoke about yesterday was activated, which is the 401 is the area code for Rhode Island.
And as you said, we talked about that one yesterday. And is that one that Chad had let Lori know he was going to text her from that 401 number?
That's correct.
And did that occur around this same date?
I believe it was the day after. Yeah, it was. I think there was an issue setting up the actual account. So it was the 9th, I believe, that he texted from his known number to Lori saying he would call from a 401.
And then if we move to the next slide, can you talk a little bit about what we're seeing on this slide?
Again, it's a summary of search activity of interest observed in the lollytimeforever@gmail.com account from March 7th, 2019 through December 14th, 2019.
And that lollytimeforever@gmail, did you determine who the associated user is?
Lori Vallow.
And on this first search, can you talk about what we're seeing there?
May 7th, 2019.
I think you've already talked about the malachite. I believe you said that's a stone that was that ended up in Chad and Lori's wedding bands or wedding
That's
rings.
correct, yes.
And when we look at the date there, was that date significant to you?
May 7th?
Well, I guess let me ask it this way. On May 7th, was Tammy still alive?
Yes, both Charles and Tammy were still alive at this point.
And the next search, if you could talk about the date and what that one is.
July 21st, 2019, Gerber Life Policy, Life Insurance for Children, the Grow Up Plan.
And what was it about that search that stood out?
We found it of interest seeing how children were missing and she was searching for life insurance for children.
And to be clear, through the investigation, did you ever determine if life insurance had been purchased for the children?
No, we did not.
And to the best of your knowledge, there was no life insurance?
No.
And the next search there and the date?
July 26, 2019, Phoenix Pet Services, Craigslist, Self-Service Dog, Little Angel Service Dogs for Sale, and Offer Up Phoenix.
And there's several searches there.
Correct.
And they appear to be in relation to a service dog.
That's correct.
Why did that stand out to you in this case?
JJ had a service dog at the time, and this search occurred roughly 2 weeks after the death of Charles Vallow. So to attempt to sell a service dog for a child after the death of his father seemed of interest to us.
And again, to be clear, JJ was still alive on July 26th.
He was, yes.
And the next search there?
August 25th, 2019, wedding bands made of malachite.
And I think we've talked a little bit about this. Did that stand out to you for the same reason?
It did, although at this point, Charles Vallow is no longer alive.
Was Tammy Daybell still alive?
She was.
And the next search?
September 20th, 2019, Kennedy Elementary, Rexburg, Idaho phone number and define possess.
And then if we also look at that next search, can you read the date on that one?
September 24th, 2019, Kennedy Elementary, Rexburg, Idaho phone number.
So for both the September 20th and September 24th, looking at that common search for the Kennedy Elementary phone number, why did that catch your attention?
We believe that JJ died around the 22nd, 23rd. So these searches would have bookended that death.
And do you know where JJ was enrolled in school around the time of his death?
At Kennedy Elementary in Rexburg, Idaho.
And on the 20th, there was that one additional search, define possess. What was it about that stood out?
Similarly to the first Ned Schneider searches that also included that possession, the concept of possession and deaths sort of going hand in hand was of interest.
And this search occurred 2 to 3 days before, or I guess 2 to 3 days before JJ's last seen alive.
That's correct.
And then if we move down to the September 30th one, can you talk a little bit about that?
How to get the back seat out of my Jeep Wrangler. Jeep Wrangler JK rear seat removal, how to DIY. Yeah. Rear seat removal, how to DIY -YouTube.
And it looks like there's essentially 2 searches there.
The way that it's written, it looks like it was probably a search and then clicking on like a YouTube link to show this,
Okay.
if I remember correctly.
And what was it about that stood out to you?
Tylee Ryan had a Jeep Wrangler as her everyday car. At this point, she is no longer alive, or her last proof of life has passed. On September 30th, well, on October 2nd, Brandon Boudreau is shot at from a Jeep Wrangler, from somebody in the backseat or the rear area of a Jeep Wrangler in Arizona. So the search of how to get the backseat out of my Jeep Wrangler by Lori, who has access to a Jeep Wrangler. Alex Cox is believed to have been the one that attempted to shoot Brandon Boudreau, who would have had access to this Jeep Wrangler. Additionally, on October 2nd, there's a video of a storage unit in Idaho where Chad and Lori are on surveillance video storing a tire, like a spare tire, and what looks like the back seat of a Jeep or some sort of vehicle in a storage unit just a few days after this search.
And then if we move to the next search.
October 2nd, 2019, Gilbert, Arizona News.
What stood out about that search?
Brandon Boudreau was shot at in Gilbert, Arizona on October 2nd.
And then the final search on here?
October 22nd, 2019, wedding dresses in Kauai.
And why did that search or those searches draw your attention?
The search was, again, wedding planning, and then also it's just days after Tammy's death and the same date as her funeral.
And when you say just days after Tammy's death, do you know the day Tammy was pronounced dead?
October 19th, 2019.
So just 3 days after Tammy's death.
That's correct.
Oh, that's okay.
And you also indicated this search was done on the same day as Tammy's funeral.
That's correct.
Do you know if Chad and Lori ultimately ended up getting married?
They did.
Do you know approximately when?
In early November.
If I may have just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blake. Mr. Pryor, cross-examination.
Thank you, Judge.
Morning.
The image I'm showing right now is of Chad and Lori going into the storage
Well,
facility.
I'm not sworn, so probably I'm tactical specialist is my title. TS if it's easier.
Mr. Pryor, your microphone's not working.
All right, Judge.
There you go.
Blake pulled one on me here.
Okay.
Turned off the microphone. So you're not so how would you like me to refer to you again? I'm sorry.
Tactical specialist is my title.
Okay. Is there an easier,
TS or
T.S. Heidemann, would that be fair?
that works, yes.
Okay. Okay. So, T.S. Heidemann, it sounds from your testimony that you've spent a considerable amount of time going over the evidence in this case.
That's correct, sir.
Gosh,
And
why
you've
is he so
familiarized
condescending?
yourself with a variety of topics. Those would include what happened in Arizona, right? What happened with Brandon Boudreaux,
Correct.
okay, and what has happened here in terms of the facts and information. You spent a bit of time, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So you're also aware that Chad Daybell is not implicated criminally in the death of Charles Vallow, Lori Vallow's fourth husband, correct?
That's correct.
And you're also aware that Chad Daybell is not criminally implicated in the attempted murder of Brandon Boudreaux in where Brandon Boudreaux was shot, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So before I get into the gist of what I'm going to talk to you about, I noticed that there's an FBI representative in the court today, and that he has been here on a number of occasions watching the testimony. I can't attest to the specific number, but I know he's been here several times. Is that your officer supervisor that's here supervising your testimony?
He's not my direct supervisor, but I do work with him, yes.
Okay, so what is he here for?
Observation,
Okay.
just to observe the,
And at any time prior to your testimony, did you discuss with this FBI person anything you were going to say today, since he's been watching the testimony for several days?
we have not discussed it he's been a part of the investigation for quite a while, so he knows of it, but we haven't discussed in detail what I'm testifying to now.
And I appreciate you saying it that way. When you say he hasn't discussed it with me in detail, what I really want to know is he discussed it with you at all in any regard, in any capacity since this trial started.
Your Honor, I'm going to object on relevance and beyond the scope of direct.
All right, well, the issue goes to the exclusionary order, and we need to just get to that point, Mr. Pryor, as to whether or not you believe there's been any violation of that.
And in essence, Judge, what I'm asking is whether she's in any regard spoken to that representative of the FBI about this case.
You can ask the question.
That's the question I'm asking. Judge.
About this case, yes, we have spoken about this case.
And when did you speak?
Over the last 4 years,
Okay.
4.5 years.
Did you speak in the last week during the testimony of this case?
Possibly. I don't remember off the top of my head if we had any other than if I was going to testify or
Okay.
timing.
And what I'm concerned about is that he's not your direct supervisor, right?
That's correct.
And there's no need to report to him, right?
It's a code situation. I don't necessarily need to report to him, but I do, as a courtesy, I am on his squad, but I have a different direct supervisor. So as a courtesy, I like to let him know if I'm
Okay.
in the office
All
or
right.
not.
And,
Yes.
and I'm going to move on. I just wanted to actually, part of that was the judge's exclusionary rule and whether or not you folks are communicating about this case. And your answer is maybe a little bit, but not in any significant way, right?
Not in any significant way, not beyond what we've talked about in the last 4+ years now.
And even though this FBI officer isn't your direct supervisor, you're just talking in general about this case, right?
I can't say in the last week or so if we have or not any details. Nothing that stands out, no.
Okay, so you don't remember whether you talked to somebody or not in the last week about a very important case in your life. Is that what you're telling
Your
me?
Honor, I'm going to object as argumentative and asked and answered.
Sustained.
Now, you identify that you were looking into attribution information and looking for Google searches as it related to this case, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, now you know the circumstances regarding J.J. Vallo's death, correct?
As much as I can.
Much
yes.
as you can,
Yeah.
right? And you have an approximate date as to when you believe J.J. Vallo was killed, right?
Correct.
And what date was that?
Well, the last proof of life was September 22nd, 2019 in the morning. We have a photo of that date. So somewhere between then and approximately September 23rd.
All right, so the afternoon of September 22nd until the morning of September 23rd, correct? Is that fair?
Yeah, morning, early afternoon, correct. Yes.
Morning, early afternoon of September 23rd.
I don't remember the exact time.
Oh, it's
but yes,
okay.
those time frames.
Well, this is a problem. Our court reporter is never going to be able to keep up when you're talking at the same time and you're both actually doing it. So please wait for an answer, wait for a new question, and don't talk over each other.
Come on,
Thank you.
Pryor. Come
So
on.
and please don't let me misrepresent your testimony. You believe that J.J. Vallo was murdered the afternoon of September 22nd up until either late morning or sometime early September 23rd, correct?
That's correct.
And at the time, are you aware of the 4 people who were around J.J. Vallo at that specific time?
What 4 people? I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get to. You're aware that J.J. Vallo was allegedly murdered either in an apartment of Lori Vallo's or a close proximity to that. Do you agree with that, right?
I don't know that we know exactly where he was killed. No.
Okay. But you do know that J.J. Vallo was being watched by Alex Cox that day and that evening of the 22nd, correct?
Partially, yes.
Okay. And you know that Melanie Gibb was there on the evening of the 22nd at Lori Vallo's apartment, correct?
That is correct. Yes.
And you know that David Warwick was there on the 22nd on the evening of the day or the day that J.J. Vallo was murdered, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so we have Lori Vallo, correct? On that day?
Yes.
Alex Cox on that day, correct?
Correct.
Melanie Gibb on that day, correct?
Correct.
David Warwick on that day, correct?
Correct.
So I'm having some difficulty with you bringing up these Google searches. And this is why I'm having some difficulty is you're talking today about searching these people's and talking about events, and we'll get to these events in a minute. I don't see any Google searches on Melanie Gibb or David Warwick. And why is that?
Your Honor, I'm going to object as argumentative.
Overruled.
Why don't I have any Google search information on Melanie Gibb or David Warwick?
I'm not aware if I don't know off the top of my head if any legal process was served on those individuals or not.
Well, and this is what I'm having some difficulty with. This is what I'm struggling with.
Your Honor, objection to the narrative. If he wants to ask a question.
I'll sustain that. Just
Okay.
questions, Mr. Pryor.
Okay. Well, if David Warwick and Melanie Gibb were present for the murder of J.J. Vallo, why aren't we looking into their Google searches?
I don't actually write the search warrant, sir, so
Okay.
I'm not sure if they were who would have done that.
Okay. But it's common knowledge that they were at least there, right?
For a partial time, yes.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now,
Hey,
you're
Sparkles.
also aware as part of your investigation that and we can discuss when we think this took place, but Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow were having a relationship, correct?
Yes, sir.
And they were engaged in a romantic relationship.
Yes, sir.
And it may have been when Charles Vallow was alive. It may have been after that, but we do know that after Charles Vallow's death, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell were in a relationship.
That's correct.
And Chad was still married to Tammy Daybell at that time, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When someone's in a relationship and you're looking at Google searches, could some of these Google searches be explained that he's trying to hide his extramarital affair with Lori Vallow?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand the.
Well, let me go over it this way. You saw on 3/6 of 2019, May 6th of 2019. Would you like me to put this up so we can look at this? Would that be easier for you?
Sure. Yeah.
Oh. Now tell me how I operate this. That's going to be a problem.
Which exhibit is this?
Judge, I don't have the number on it. It was what Ms. Blake was just talking to as part of the attribution and the Googles.
That 184A?
I think so.
Okay, 184A, then I'll note, not the PowerPoint, but the printout copy can be displayed to the witness and published for cross-exam.
And please excuse me, at my age, technology is just getting hooked up to Bluetooth is a challenge for me. So we're looking at 3/6 of 2019, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Now, before I start, one of the things I have some difficulty with is we don't know who did these Google searches, right?
Correct. I cannot say that I witnessed Chad Daybell type these into a search bar, but somebody with access to the Chad Daybell account
So if there was,
conducted searches. Yes.
Judge, I'll pause. I'm sorry. The next question's already in my head, and it's just getting it to spit out, and I'll try to control myself a little bit. So you put this off of a computer at Chad Daybell's house, right?
I reviewed a search warrant return from Google is what I
Okay.
was looking at. So not the computer directly, no.
So other than the time when Tammy Daybell passed away, are you aware that there were 3 or 4 other people who were living in Chad Daybell's house at the time?
I don't know. I think at least one child, but there could have been more. It's possible.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So we don't know who actually did these searches, right?
Or I don't know from what device these were searched. No, I mean, it could have been a phone. You could be logging into from different devices. Correct.
Okay. So I want to start, and we'll deal with the Ned Schneider ones in a minute here. 3/6/2019.
Morning, Mel.
Tammy Daybell's still alive, right?
Yes.
Now, I'm looking at that, and that on 3/6/2019, Chad Daybell was already in this relationship with Lori Vallow, right?
Correct.
So, and I don't want you don't have to say what you're thinking, but it looks like June 26th star sign are Cancer, Lead compatible, and Leo compatible. And also May 4 sign Taurus and Leo compatible. That's what that is, right?
Correct.
And what your testimony said is that it looks like someone's trying to see whether, if we assume that it's Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell in the Cancer and Leo, right? That's what you're sort of implying to this jury, isn't it?
Well, based on the birth dates, May
Right.
4th and June 26th. Correct. Yes.
Okay. And based on the birth dates, May 4th of Taurus and Leo compatible as well, right? On May on March 6th.
Yes.
So if someone is trying to find out and is involved in an extramarital relationship, and you're Googling whether or not your current spouse or your new girlfriend are compatible, that would be a reasonable explanation, would it not?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then we go back and look at the malachite, eBay malachite jewelry on May 5, right?
Correct.
Okay. And if you're talking to someone that you're having an extramarital affair, and they encourage you to say, oh, someday maybe we could be together. I love malachite. And she starts dropping hints. That could be an explanation for that as well, right?
It could, but I believe that Chad's malachite searches began before Lori's.
Oh, but I understand the searches.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
I understand that. But why don't you show me the phone records where they talked about malachite and that Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell discussed the issue of malachite? Did you see any of those?
I can't remember if they were in any text messages or not, but ultimately they purchased wedding bands that were malachite wedding bands. Yes.
Okay. And were you also aware that during this time, there was discussion with Alex Cox and Zaluma Pastenes about malachite as well?
I don't remember off the top of my head. No, sir.
Okay. All right. So we don't know whether this search for malachite was a discussion between a boyfriend and a girlfriend, or whether or not it was about Alex Cox and his future marriage to Zaluma Pastenes, right?
Objection, Your Honor. States facts not in evidence and argumentative.
Sustained.
Now, the Ned Schneider issue. Again, when was Charles Vallow murdered by Lori Vallow and Alex Cox?
July 11th, 2019.
Okay. So there was a discussion about this. And the first time you ever heard about Ned Schneider was when Charles Vallow brought it up in an audio recording about his wife at the time, correct?
I believe that's correct, somewhere in early January.
And the date of that was when?
I don't have the exact date of the body cam recordings or the police reports, but I believe it's pretty close to this time frame.
Prior to that time frame, right?
Yeah, right in that general time frame.
Okay. So, and in that general time frame, there was a discussion of Ned Schneider, right?
Yes, sir.
And at that point, it's your position that Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell were involved in an extramarital affair at that point.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you happen to look into the fact that Charles Vallow and Lori Vallow called off their divorce and tried to reconcile their marriage in February of 2019?
I do. Yes, I do remember that. I don't remember the time frame, but that sounds probably pretty close. Yeah.
You don't remember exactly when in February, but they did attempt a reconciliation and basically tried to renew their relationship, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Lori said she
So
wanted to get
the
her
idea of Ned
finances in
Schneider,
order.
you didn't see anything else in Chad Daybell prior to January 28th of 2019, did you?
Did I see anything
With Ned Schneider and Chad Daybell making any look into what Ned Schneider was all about, right? Prior to this?
prior to, no, I believe was the first search, at least in this time frame,
Okay.
that Ned Schneider appeared in Chad's Google searches.
Okay. So at that point, we can't make any assumptions, obviously, right?
No.
Okay. But we do know that as far as you're concerned, on the 28th of January, 2019, somehow Chad Daybell learned about the topic of Ned Schneider and decided to do a Google search and see what that was all about, right?
Objection, Your Honor. Misstates the testimony.
Overruled. You can answer.
I don't know if he learned of it or if he was doing searches. He did searches for various individuals pretty frequently.
Right.
This is the only one that we found that had connection to other pieces of evidence in the case.
And you just led into my next question, and thank you for doing that.
Hi, Tiggy
Because
girl.
when I reviewed all of this evidence, I saw that it was not uncommon when a topic came up for someone who was using that computer to do a search on a number of different topics. That would be fair, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Okay. So if he were to learn about the name Ned Schneider, it would be consistent with his or whoever was using that computer to Google it and see what it was all about. Would that be fair?
Potentially, I can't speak of when he learned that name or if he was
Okay.
searching it like he was a lot of other names. I'm not sure
Right.
the order of that, no.
But his history shows that there's a lot of inquiry into various names, various topics, and that was something that was going on that computer quite frequently. Hundreds of thousands of searches, right?
Certainly lots of searches, yes.
Right. And then we go down to Malachite, and we don't know where he got the name Malachite from, but then he started searching that as well, right?
Correct.
And then he got to Hiplos, and we don't know what the story is on Hiplos, but he typed in that name, so he must have got the name from somewhere and started as that, right?
Correct.
And then you get down to 7/19 of 2019. Now, when you say you surprise someone with accusations, we don't know who typed that in, right?
Again, somebody, I can't say specifically, but somebody with access to the chad.daybell@gmail.com account.
So it could be someone's trying to learn about how you react when a spouse finds out that you're cheating on her, right?
Yes, it could be.
Okay. And we don't know who did the south-southwest wind and what is the definition of that, right?
Again, all I can say is it was somebody with access to that account.
Right. And when you're talking about the day before the accusation is, or the prosecutors claiming that may have been the day that Kylie Ryan was put in the ground on 9/9, but you're also aware that on 9/9, Chad Daybell sent an email to his wife at the time, Tammy Daybell, and said, "I'm going to burn some limbs in the backyard," the next day, right?
I believe that text message was sent on the 9th that he said he
Right.
wanted to burn, yes,
Yeah.
limbs, yeah.
Right. So on the 8th, he's checking the wind. And on the 9th, he sends an email to his wife saying, "I'm going to burn some limbs in the backyard." Right?
Correct.
Okay. And then Rhode Island area code. Now, you don't know what kind of phones we're dealing with. These aren't like track phones, are they? Or do you know what kind of phones these are?
I believe they might actually be track phones.
Go ahead.
No, that's,
Oh, you believe they are all track phones, right?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I mean, so track phone is kind of a provider. So if you're asking like, is it an iPhone or an Android? I'm not.
Right.
Yeah.
But the track phone, the way that works, and if you don't know, please tell me if you don't have knowledge of this, but the way the track phone works is you buy the phone for a period of 90 days. It expires and you can either buy another phone rather inexpensively, or you have to buy the adding the minutes thing. And there's no real discernible difference in the cost, right?
Correct. Yeah, you can keep the phone and change the number, correct?
Right. Or you can just get a different phone and same thing. And you buy that at, I don't want to give anybody publicity, but large retail stores that sell a lot of groceries and other things, right?
Yes.
You know what we're talking about.
Yes.
Okay. So if you're having an affair with somebody and you don't want to get discovered that you're having this affair with another woman while you're still married, it wouldn't be illogical for you to buy a number of phones, and as the phones expire, you just buy another phone to sort of protect yourself from being discovered that you're having this affair. Would that be fair?
Correct. I mean, in this
Okay.
situation, he's not buying phones. It's changed. It's the same phone. The IMEI number stayed the same on all of them. So
Right.
the device didn't change, but the phone number did. Yes.
Okay.
Same idea.
So that would be, it's possible that what he's trying to do is he's trying to cover up the fact that he doesn't want to be discovered by his wife that he's cheating on her, right?
Correct.
Okay. And Judge, if I can ask the court again the number for the summary of search activity with Lolly Time with Lori Vallow, what that exhibit was again?
It's 184A.
If I have permission, Judge, may I have permission to publish?
You can publish that page, which is a printed copy of the PowerPoint presentation.
My entire body just like shivers when I
So again, we
hear
see the subject of Malachite
condescending
and whoever is on Lolly Time, whether it's Lori Vallow
phoniness.
or whatever is doing that, correct?
Correct.
Now, this is what is interesting to me on 7/21 of 2019. Okay?
Objection, Your Honor. Again, there's a narrative. I'd move to strike and counsel and ask that he ask a question.
Yeah,
I'll ask him.
it is sustained, and Mr. Pryor, please refrain from that as
Okay.
questions.
All right. So 7/21 of 2019, and my notes seem to indicate that you said that was a short time after Lori Vallow and Alex Cox murdered Charles Vallow. Is that fair?
Yes, that would have been approximately 10 days after Charles's death.
Okay. And prior to Lori Vallow moving to Idaho, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So you know from the facts, and you familiarized yourself with the Charles Vallow case, right?
That's correct.
And you know from the facts that at the time Charles Vallow was murdered, Lori Vallow was there, wasn't she?
At approximately the same time. I don't know the exact timing. I know she left
Right.
at a certain point, but I don't know exactly the time frame. Yes.
Well, you know that after the murder, that Lori Vallow was interviewed in front of the house right after the murder.
That's correct. Yes.
You also know that she left a little bit of time because prior to the murder, Tylee Ryan was present, and so was J.J. Vallow at the time, or at around the circumstances relating to the murder of Charles Vallow, correct?
Correct.
So it seems then that at least Tylee Ryan and J.J. Vallow would have knowledge, or at least information as it relates to the murder of Charles Vallow. Would that seem logical?
Yes, it would.
Okay. So if someone's looking
Okay.
and realizing that their children witnessed the murder of their father by their own brother, that's a motive for a number of things, right?
I suppose.
Okay. It's also a motive on 7/21 of 2019 to come up with a reason to get rid of a child if that child witnessed the murder of their stepfather, correct?
Potentially.
Okay, potentially.
I don't know if they saw that. I believe that Lori and the children left. I think if I understand right, there's a bit of discrepancy about if the kids were actually there
Right.
to witness the shooting, but I thought that they left prior to the actual shooting.
Well, you
But
did,
they listened to there was an argument, yes.
and there's
correct.
a discussion because part of the FBI and the officers down there interviewed witnesses who suggested both sides of that issue, correct?
Correct. I don't know if we know. I mean, Tylee obviously isn't here to ask, so we're not sure what exactly she saw at the time.
Yeah. So we don't know what JJ saw. We don't know what Tylee saw because the evidence goes both ways in terms of what exactly did they see in regards to the murder of Charles Vallow, right?
I believe Tylee was interviewed, and I don't recall what her interview stated,
Okay.
but I don't remember about JJ.
Okay. But you also know that one of Tylee's very close friends was interviewed and provided information about what Tylee said as well, right?
I don't remember that, but
Okay.
that makes sense. Yes.
Yeah. So then that's why there's some discussion because we don't know exactly where Tylee was when Alex Cox murdered Charles Vallow, right?
Correct.
Okay. So Lori Vallow, before she comes to Idaho on 7/21 of 2019, searches a life insurance policy for her children. Okay. Now there's no equal discussion I didn't see it and I went looked at the stuff. I didn't see anything where Chad Daybell talked about life insurance for the children. He didn't, did he?
No, sir.
And there's no email or search on let's kill 2 kids, right? By Chad Daybell?
No.
Okay. And would you agree with me that part of the rationale of bringing up Hiplos and James and Elena is because of the religious connotation, right?
Not necessarily the religious connotation. It just provides some context in other evidence because of the aliases, and it gets complicated with the names that they call each other.
Right.
So to see that they're being searched by these individuals and to provide context for later of
Okay.
where these names are coming from.
Okay. Now, so we have some references to religion, calling each other religious names. And you're aware that both of these folks have strong religious beliefs.
Yes, sir.
And you're aware Melanie Gibb has strong religious beliefs.
Yes, sir.
David Warwick has strong religious beliefs.
Yes, sir.
Zaluma Pastenes, Alex's wife, strong religious beliefs.
Yeah.
Wrong
In
or
fact, the circle of
extreme?
all these people, there's repeated references to religion, right?
Absolutely.
Strong references to religion.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess what I'm kind of wondering, is it a bigger motive to kill two kids by their mother and brother to cover up the murder of a fourth husband? Or is it because they killed the kids because Chad, Lori, Melanie Gibb, and David Warwick and Zaluma Pastenes have strong religious beliefs? Which one is a greater motive to murder children?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative.
Sustained.
9:30 of 2019. How to get the back seat out of a Jeep. And that's Lori Vallow, right?
Yes, sir.
There's nothing about Chad Daybell trying to figure out how to get the back seat out of a Jeep, right?
No, sir.
And I guess if a girlfriend asks you to help me get a tire because somebody wants to use the Jeep, that would explain why Chad was helping his girlfriend load and unload a tire, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Gilbert, Arizona News on the day that Brandon Boudreaux, and you've previously testified that Brandon Boudreaux, Chad Daybell is not criminally implicated in anything with Brandon Boudreaux, correct?
He's not being charged, correct, sir?
He's what?
He's not being charged.
Right,
in
not
Arizona,
being
correct,
charged, not
yes.
being pursued for anything for any reason. But
Objection, Your Honor, that misstates the testimony.
Sustained. And again, counsel, try to let the witness finish her response before you get into another question, please.
Your Honor, and I would move to strike counsel's last statement.
I'll strike that. I'll instruct the jurors not to consider that last statement.
okay.
How many
So
times
your
does he have to be
comment is
reminded?
Chad Daybell has not been charged. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Did you see a likewise Google search on Chad Daybell's Google account that talked about Gilbert, Arizona on that day?
Not that I recall.
Okay. And then you're aware that that on 10/22 of 2019, are you aware that Lori Vallow was in Hawaii by herself with a friend?
Yes.
And you were aware that her friend was Audrey?
Yes, Audrey and maybe Melanie Boudreaux. I know there was some shuffling there, but I don't remember the exact time frame. But
Right.
yes.
But they were, about 10/22 of 2019, Lori Vallow and a couple of friends went to Hawaii, and I believe they were in Kauai, I remember. Is that fair?
I don't remember what island, but yes, that sounds fair.
But the purpose of them being there was to start the process of getting a wedding dress for Audrey Boudreaux, right?
I do not know that. No, sir.
Okay. But the three of them were there, right?
Yes.
Okay. You just don't know why they were there and what they were doing there on that day, right?
Yeah, it seemed like kind of a spontaneous.
So if Audrey Boudreaux was looking for a wedding dress on 10/22 of 2009.
Your Honor, objection. Counsel's stating facts not in evidence.
Yeah, there's no Audrey Boudreaux, Mr. Pryor.
Also asked and answered.
I'm sorry, Judge.
Audrey Boudreaux.
Baratori, Judge. I'm sorry. I said Boudreaux. It's Baratori. I got the name wrong.
Fair.
No, is that the correct name?
Audrey Baratiero or
Baratiero.
Melanie Boudreaux. Yeah.
I got them backwards.
They both were in Hawaii, but yeah, I'm not sure which one you were.
With her.
Correct. I think some of them overlapped, but at different times. I don't know on 10/22 exactly off the top of my head now.
Right. And you don't know, and you don't have facts one way or the other as to whether or not on that particular day they were looking for wedding dresses, right?
I don't, other than that search, no.
Okay. Judge, I think that's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Blake, redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor. We'll start with the last question. You were asked about Audrey Baratario and searching for wedding dresses. Are you aware if Audrey's married?
At the time, I don't believe she was, no.
Anything in your investigation or records you reviewed that showed she was engaged?
I believe she'd mentioned, or I don't think she was actually married, no. I'm trying to remember now. I don't think she was.
And you were asked about the attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux. And I think you indicated Chad has not been charged in that. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
And in relation to Charles Vallow, Chad has not been charged. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
Are you still part of any active investigation in those cases?
Am I on to testify in those cases?
Are you assisting in any further investigation if there is any going on?
No,
And those are being handled by agencies in Arizona. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
So all you can say right now is that Chad hasn't been charged.
Yeah, I haven't really followed that portion of it, no, other than what was included in this investigation, yes.
You were asked about those Ned Snyder searches. Are you aware through your investigation who designated Charles as Ned?
I guess
That would be
Lori
Chad.
calls Charles Ned is the first time where you sort of hear that on the body cam footage. Charles is relaying that Lori refers to him as Ned. I don't know where that name comes from, no. I don't know if she brought it up or if Chad gave her that name. I don't know
It
how
came
that
from
worked.
Chad.
And the searches from Chad were being done around the same time Charles is reporting that Lori's calling him Ned Schneider.
It's around the same time, yes.
You were asked about the potential for someone else to use Chad's email to do some searches.
Potentially, yes.
Did you find any searches in related to that email, to Chad's email regarding divorce or separation?
Not that I recall.
You were also asked about people changing phone numbers to hide an affair.
Yes.
Are there, in your experience, do people involved in criminal activity also switch phone numbers?
Yes.
And then there was some talk about Melanie. Actually, let me back up. There was some extensive discussion regarding the killing of Charles Vallow and where JJ and Tylee were. Do you know where they were at the time Charles was actually shot?
I don't believe they were there. I believe the report said that Lori took the children to, I think they went to Burger King or something. But I don't know if that was corroborated or not.
And we talked about the phone attribution earlier, and with one of Chad's numbers, you'd made reference to attributing that number to him in part because of a mortuary call. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And that call to the mortuary, do you recall what day that took place?
I believe it was July 11th, 2019,
And when was Charles killed?
the same day.
And do you know where the mortuary was located that he placed that call to?
In Arizona, but I don't remember which city.
And Charles was killed in Arizona?
That's correct.
Then you were asked quite a bit about Melanie Gibb and David Warwick. Their names came up at least. Is that fair?
Yes.
Did Melanie, through your investigation, did you determine whether, or was there anything to indicate Melanie Gibb or David Warwick profited from JJ's death?
Judge, objection goes beyond the scope.
Overruled.
I did not learn of anything why they would benefit from JJ's death now.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
All right. I don't believe that opened any doors for additional recross. Did you have anything, Mr. Pryor?
Judge, I would have a couple subjects, but if the court's determination is that there's nothing open for recross, I'll defer to the court's wisdom.
All right. That will conclude then the testimony of this witness. Practical Agent Heidemann, you are done testifying. Is this witness going to be recalled, do you believe?
She is going to be recalled by the state. I'm not sure if she's being recalled by the defense.
Not by the defense, Judge.
Okay, since you are going to be recalled, I'll just remind you there is an exclusionary order in place. You're not permitted to discuss your testimony or review the testimony of other witnesses in the case in between now and the time that you're recalled. If you don't comply with that order, you may be prohibited from further testimony. So please comply with that.
Sure.
All right. You can go ahead and step down then, and I'll inquire of the state momentarily as to who they will be calling as their next witness.
I remember that distinctly about that mortuary call from Charles coming out. That came out a little while back. And I love how the judge is not.
All right, who will the state
allowing
call next?
Prior.
And thank you, Your Honor. I'm just looking at the time. I think it's about 15 minutes to 10. The next witness, I believe, will be on the stand for quite some time. I'm not sure if the court would like to take a break now or how soon you wanted to take the mid-morning break.
My preference is to probably get started with this witness if they're a longer witness anyway, and then go for maybe another 30 minutes.
So trying to take a break at about 10:15.
I think so.
I will try to
Judges,
keep an eye on the
forward.
clock for that. The next witness is Detective Duncan.
Detective Duncan.
Go ahead and call your witness then.
Don't you love how Pryor tried to make this a jealous wife motive? And that Lori was acting alone because she was a jealous.
Officer or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help.
Or because she was worried about her jealous husband. When there's all this evidence of them plotting and planning, and Lori's brother had been warning the family that.
All right, the
he's
court will note
plotting and
that
planning
the
against
witness,
Charles.
Detective Duncan, has been placed under oath. I am going to inquire as to whether or not you have viewed any of these trial proceedings because it is being live streamed. Have you listened in on any of the testimony that's been provided in trial since the case started?
I have not.
All right, thank you for that affirmation. With that, Ms. Blake, you can go ahead and inquire on direct if you'd like.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you please spell your name for the record?
Good morning. My name is Nathan Duncan. It's Nathan. Last is Duncan, Duncan.
Where are you currently employed?
I'm currently employed with the Chandler Police Department in Chandler, Arizona.
What is your current title and or position?
I'm currently assigned to the robbery homicide unit as a detective.
How long have you been with that unit?
Robbery homicide unit, I've been there for 10 years.
Have you held other positions within the Chandler Police Department?
I have. I was hired with Chandler Police Department in year 2000, June of 2000, went to the academy, graduated in September. After graduating from the academy, I was a patrol officer for roughly 3 years. And after that, I went to the property crimes unit as a detective for approximately 11 years.
Do you have any specialized training in order to be a law enforcement officer?
So our training, like I stated, in June of 2000, we attend the Arizona Law Enforcement Academy as a program. I believe it was 16 weeks. And then afterwards, we attend a field training program with our own department. After that, every year, for the last almost 24 years, we go through advanced officer training, and we also do additional training in our specific area of expertise, if you would.
And were you working with the Chandler Police Department on July 11th of 2019?
I was.
Do you recall if you were on shift?
I was, yes.
And do you recall responding out to a report of a shooting?
Yes.
Do you recall where that was?
Report of the shooting on July 11th, 2019 happened at about 8:36 a.m. at the address of 5531 South Four Peaks Place in Chandler.
And you said the call came in about 8:36 a.m.?
Correct.
Were you one of the first responding law enforcement?
I was not.
Do you recall approximately when you responded out?
I would have arrived probably 20, 30 minutes after that original call.
When a call comes in of a shooting, who goes out first? Is it a patrol officer, a detective? Can you talk a little bit about that process?
So the immediate response to a call for service, in this case, a 911 call, a patrol officer will respond, or multiple patrol officers will respond for that call of service. They will get there, triage the situation, assist in any way they can, and then determine what they have. If additional resources are needed or investigative resources are needed from detectives, then detectives will be called in.
And in this case, did you learn who made that 911 call?
I did.
And who was that?
Alex Cox.
Did you learn what was reported?
Yes, Alex had contacted 911 and reported that he had shot his brother-in-law, Charles Vallow, in self-defense.
Prior to that, had you ever heard the name Charles Vallow?
I had not.
Had you ever heard the name Alex Cox?
I had not.
When you arrived on scene, were you given specific assignments?
Yes, in homicide investigations, we were given assignments. The case agent in this case was Detective Nathan Moffat, and he will assign tasks, if you would. In this particular case, I was assigned, along with Detective Coons, to document the crime scene.
And I think you've said, and that's common in a homicide investigation.
Yes, there are many multiple parts to go into a homicide investigation: interviews, scene processing. So we have a team of 6 at that particular unit, so we will divide up tasks.
At some point, did your role within the investigation change?
It did.
And can you talk a little bit about that?
So with the promotion of Detective Moffat in June of 2020, I was assigned to be the case agent in the death of Charles Vallow in June of 2020. However, I had done work prior to this date on this case.
And backing up to that July 11th, you're one of the scene detectives.
Yes.
Can you walk us through what you observed when you got there?
So as our job as a scene detective, we are there to document the scene, and we are assisted by crime scene technicians in this effort. So our first move that we'll make is we'll have the patrol officers who are present, who can provide some of the information to us as to what took place, give us a briefing. From that point, one of our crime scene technicians will enter and take overall photographs. And during this time, we will make observations of our own. The crime scene in this case was very simple relative to other crime scenes. The residence on Four Peaks Place, single family residence. You enter the residence through a front door on the west of the residence. As you enter, you come into a small foyer, and then it opens up into a large living room. This one was unique, in which there was a wood plank floor. There was no furniture in this living room. There was mirrors along the north side, an open window along the east side, mirrors on the wall on the south side, and mirrors on the wall on the west side. So as indicated, it was very sparse. There was no furniture at all. Inside, when making my observations, I noticed the body of a Caucasian male, later identified to be Charles Vallow, laying on the west side of this room. North of where he was laying, there was an aluminum baseball bat. And then a little bit north of this was a baseball cap that we had found out was worn by Charles earlier. To the west of Charles' body, there were 2 .45 caliber casings that were recovered. Also noted during this time was a bullet strike and a lodged bullet, or what we refer to as a projectile, that had lodged into the baseboard along the east side of that particular room.
And as you walk in, that's your initial scene observation.
Yes,
As part of the scene detective or just as part of the investigation, did you make observations regarding the body of Charles Vallow?
I did.
And I guess to back up a little bit, are you aware as to Charles' condition when first responding officers arrived?
When first responding officers arrived, he was pronounced dead by the Chandler Fire Department.
So upon your arrival, he'd already been pronounced dead.
That is correct.
Do you know if prior to your arrival, there were any life-saving measures taken?
There were reports in the that Alex Cox had done CPR. And there was also indications, evidence left behind that the fire department had placed EKG or AED pads on Charles to determine whether life-saving efforts were needed.
And you said it was reported that Alex had done CPR. Did you observe any signs that would support CPR having been performed?
So in looking at Charles' body and the position that it was found, his head was to the north and his feet were to the south and his arms were to his side. I did see one wound consistent with a bullet wound in the front lower left quadrant of his torso. And that's the only wound that I noticed at the time. His shirt was cut open. He had a black t-shirt on. It was cut open by fire department. And as indicated, AED pads and EKG leads were put on for medical intervention. I did notice a lot of blood that was present on the floor or surrounding his body. Did not notice a lot of blood, which in my opinion, having given CPR and having been shot multiple times, I believe there should have been more blood.
And in relation to the CPR, had it been performed, you would have expected to see more blood?
I would have expected that, yes.
So based on your experience, you didn't see signs of CPR having been performed?
Correct.
And additional observations of Charles' body, were you able to see how many wounds he had initially?
So as indicated initially, it was just the one that I noticed with the front of his body, the lower left quadrant of his torso.
And at some point, did you notice any additional injuries to Charles' body?
I did.
And can you tell us what those were?
So in this case, in all homicide or death investigation cases, when the medical examiner is coming out to assist in these cases, the body is considered evidence, and we do not touch the body until the medical examiner arrives. They have jurisdiction over the body. So my initial observations were that one wound consistent with a bullet wound to the front lower left quadrant. After the medical examiner arrives, they take their own series of photographs, and we provide them with information that we know at the time. At that point, the medical examiner will then begin to examine or manipulate the body as they choose. During this time, the AED pad that was placed in the center of Charles's chest was removed, and an additional wound consistent with a bullet wound was noticed in the center of his chest. Additionally, when Charles' body was rolled, there were 2 additional wounds on his back consistent with bullet holes.
And when you talk about the 2 injuries to the front and the 2 to the back, did they appear to be, one being an entry wound, one being an exit wound, did they appear to be linked?
We try not to make that determination at the time. A lot of that goes in as far as entry, exits, and we also talk through the totality of the circumstances. In this case, Alex had mentioned that he had shot twice, so we would assume that they would be entrance wounds and exit wounds.
And so you talked about, Alex said he'd shot Charles twice, correct?
Correct.
Are you aware of what else Alex had claimed in relation to the shooting?
As indicated, he claimed that he had shot him in self-defense. He had indicated that he had the baseball bat, and Charles had struck Alex in the back of the head with the baseball bat and refused to drop the bat, and that's when he shot him.
And based on your observations, were you able to form any opinion in your training and experience as to where they would have been where Charles would have been in relation to the shooting?
Yes. So Alex had informed us that he was standing in the southwest corner of this particular living room, as described, and he was facing in a northeast direction. And he and Charles were face to face with each other. He indicated that he shot him twice standing up, and he shot him twice in the chest from a standing position.
And are you aware if you talked about the medical examiner's office showing up to take Charles' body?
Yes.
Do you know if an autopsy was ultimately conducted?
It was.
And are you aware if there was any determination made as to whether or not Charles would have been standing when both shots were fired?
So the two wounds, according to the medical examiner, the wound described in the center of the chest was front to back, exited his back, and it was slightly at a downward angle. The second wound that I'd mentioned, the lower left quadrant, that bullet traveled upward at a very steep angle, exiting the back of Charles's shoulder. When examining, observing the original scene, we had brought Alex back to do what's called a walkthrough to have him explain exactly where he was when all this took place. He indicated, like I stated, that he was standing and fired 2 shots standing, and while Charles was in front of him. Prior to Alex coming, we made the decision to cleaning up the blood that was left. And when we did clean up that blood, noticed a indention in the plate wood flooring that was near Charles's left shoulder, and that would be consistent with the exit wound on that back left. Also near Charles's left shoulder was a bullet or a projectile that was present when first responders arrived. So based on the autopsy reports and the scene evidence, the first shot fired on Charles would have been the center of his chest, exiting the back and then lodging in the baseboard. The second shot fired at Charles would have been while he was laying down on the ground.
That's just cold-hearted.
And you talked about this room either not having furniture, being very sparsely furnished. Based on your investigation, were you able to determine whether or not a struggle had occurred?
Obviously, one thing we look at, we're trying to determine and prove or disprove the self-defense claim. And with the room being sparsely furnished, we were unable to see if anything was knocked over, broken, anything like that. Charles did have some wounds or some abrasions to his knees. He was wearing shorts at the time. So he had some abrasions to his knees and also some scrapes on his hands or arms, some minor scrapes there. So those two things would indicate that a struggle took place, but other than that, there was nothing that would indicate that.
And you talked about, we've talked a little bit about the blood in relation to at least the CPR. Was there any additional blood located in the residence?
There was.
And can you talk a little bit about that?
So Alex had indicated that he had washed his hands in the sink at the residence. The only other location that blood was present, besides underneath Charles's body, was on the faucet in the kitchen sink.
And was this, based on the report of the shooting, was this investigated as a homicide?
Yes, it was.
And we talked a little bit about, you ended up taking over the case or being assigned the case agent or the lead on this in June of 2020.
Correct.
You initially responded out on this July 11th date of 2019. Did you continue to work on the case after July 11th, 2019?
Unfortunately, right after this homicide, I had another homicide, so I did not work on it for a period of time. I then picked up this case and assisted Detective Moffat roughly January of 2020, and with looking at phone extractions and iCloud information.
And when you picked up again in January, you talked about you started looking at phone extractions.
Correct.
As part of that, did you end up seeking some search warrants?
I did.
And was one of the devices that you reviewed the content of Charles Vallow's phone?
Yes, it was.
And do you recall how you came to be in possession of Charles Vallow's phone?
Yes. Through our investigation, we had determined that Charles's phone was pretty much the catalyst of an argument that occurred between Lori and Charles on this day. After the shooting, or shortly after the shooting, Lori had left the house, taking Charles's phone with her. She would later return that phone to detectives, and that phone was now in our possession, and an extraction was done on that actual device.
And did you in fact review the extraction?
I did.
And in reviewing the extraction, was there a significant amount of information contained on that device?
Yes, there is.
And as you went through it, did you look at things that seemed to have significance to you in relation to the investigation?
Yes.
And in preparation of your testimony today, did you prepare an exhibit related to that content?
I did.
Do you believe that it would aid in your testimony today?
Absolutely.
Do you believe it would aid the jurors in understanding the evidence and information?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask that the witness be shown what's been marked as State's Exhibit 49. I do have a copy for counsel and a courtesy copy for the court as well. Again, as with some of the last exhibits from the state, these are printouts of a PowerPoint. The PowerPoint itself is on a jump drive.
I have always been angry at how the police in Arizona handled Charles Vallow, because he tried to raise the alarm bells in January of 2019. He told them everything, and he was right. And she went into the police headquarters and charmed the police with her beauty and her flirtatious nature. She brought Tylee
Counsel, these are 3 different exhibits, right?
and Melanie
4.
Gibb with her, and they helped
Looks like they're all the same.
boost her up as a normal
I
person.
believe there are some other exhibits. That should all be one exhibit. Or
And is it your position I get one of these?
yes, there would be a copy for you.
Thank you. Thank you, officer.
He did. He seemed like a good, normal man. I'm sure he had many faults, but I don't think he was plotting to kill people. And she darvoed the hell out of him.
And Detective, I would ask you to just look through those if you could.
Okay.
My understanding is that right after she was incarcerated, she said to other inmates something like, would you deny this? And, with her body and her looks, she always depended on her body and her looks to get her by. And for a long time, it worked.
Okay.
Do those appear to be an accurate depiction of the PowerPoint that you prepared?
They do.
And again, they are taken from an extraction from Charles Vallow's cell phone. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Did that include looking at an iCloud account?
It does include an iCloud account. Yes.
And does it include messages or other content from that phone as well?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, I would move for the admission of State's Exhibit 49.
No objection, Judge.
All right, Exhibit 49 will be admitted, and again, this will be actually the PowerPoint on a digital format, and the court has reviewed a printed copy of that. Ms. Blake, with that being introduced, if you'd like, I think this would be a good time to stop for the morning recess before we start with the publishing of this, if that's where you're headed.
That is where I'm headed next, Your Honor.
Okay, let's go ahead and take our mid-morning recess then, 30-minute recess, and we will be back on the record after that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All rise, please.
Yeah, I agree, Solo. I am not qualified to diagnose anyone's personality disorder, but she seems to have all the classic markings of borderline. So basically, it's interesting that they're getting so far into the whole Charles Vallow side of this. I wasn't aware that they were going to get this far into Charles Vallow's murder. And that that murder honestly set everything off. It set everything off. If the police in Arizona had listened to Charles and listened to everything he said, he even had documentation. He had papers in his hand. Look, I think I pulled when this is a picture of him from his body cam. You see all this devices and papers he had in his hands. That was proof of what he was talking about. He was trying to explain to them. And look at the look on the police officer's face there. She's looking at him like he's crazy because he's describing a crazy woman. But they made it look like he was crazy. You know? It just kills me. It kills me that they didn't listen to him in the beginning. Oh, look at this stuff. Look at what's coming up on the screen there. So I'm going to take this down. So the Karen Reed trial is in jury selection, and there are some updates from it. So I want to show that I'd like to watch them with you. Let's see what they have to say. Here we go. Up. One moment. One moment. Ah. Oh. Okay. Sorry, everyone. I got a little bit mixed up. Here we go.
I'll give the last sentence. I'm not going to give the other sentence because Ms. Reed's presumed innocent and has no burden of proof, and I would be assigning her a burden of proof, and I'm not going to do that. Based on the offer of proof on Friday, I am well within my rights pursuant to the case law to exclude the third-party culprit defense. I'm not going to do that now. I'm going to give you a chance to develop it through relevant, competent, admissible evidence, but you cannot open on it. So that's my ruling on that. I would like to see counsel at sidebar about the supplemental questionnaire. Again, counsel. Good morning again, Ms. Reed. Good morning, jurors. My name's Beverly Canoni. I'm a judge of this court, and I want to welcome you here this morning. Jury service, as you know, is one of the most important duties that we have as citizens. Our system of justice simply would not work without you, and we appreciate that you're here today, ready, willing, and able to serve if called upon to do so. So
You are unmuted.
we're selecting a jury today in a criminal case that you just heard, Commonwealth versus Karen Reed. The Commonwealth alleges that on the morning of January 29th, 2022, at approximately 6:00.
So the judge is about to give an overview of the case. So this is helpful for anyone who hasn't followed it much. And I agree, Solo, the drama around this case is really yucky. It's really yucky and unnecessary. And, it's created this divide in the community where there are some people who have taken up this free Karen Reed mantle. Solo Sock, I thought it was justified.
4 a.m., the Canton Police Department received a 911 call reporting an unresponsive male party in the snow outside a residence at 34 Fairview Road within their town. Officers responded and discovered the male party, later identified as John O'Keefe, off the roadway in the front lawn area.
Hey, Johnny. Yeah, for anybody else who's just joining, the Daybell trial is on their morning break. So we're just checking in on the Karen Reed jury selection. And the judge is giving an overview of the case. So for those of you who are not very familiar with the case, here's an overview.
Officers identified 3 women with Mr. O'Keefe, one of whom was the defendant, Karen Reed, the girlfriend of Mr. O'Keefe. The defendant had been with Mr. O'Keefe the previous evening at 2 different bars in Canton and had driven with him to his residence in the early morning hours of this date. Mr. O'Keefe was treated by paramedics from the Canton Fire Department and transported to the Good Samaritan Medical Center, where he was later pronounced deceased. The Commonwealth alleges that the defendant struck Mr. O'Keefe with her vehicle earlier that morning and then left the scene while Mr. O'Keefe lay injured in the snow during a blizzard. The defendant denies that she has committed these or any crimes alleged in this case, and she has pled not guilty. So the defendant is charged, as you've heard, with second-degree murder and also charged with manslaughter while operating under the influence and leaving the scene after causing personal injury or death. I will describe these crimes in detail at the end of the case when I teach the jury the law, but briefly, murder is the unlawful killing of a human being. In order to prove the defendant guilty of second-degree murder, the Commonwealth must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed an unlawful killing and that it was done with malice. In comparison, involuntary manslaughter is an unintentional, unlawful killing caused by wanton or reckless conduct. These terms and the elements of the crimes will be explained to you in detail at the end of the case before you begin your deliberations. Now, at the outset, I would like to address the issue of public interest in this case and the duty of this court to adhere to the rule of law. John Adams said that we are a government of laws, not of men, and that the law must be deaf to the clamoring of the public. He meant that while public opinion about a given subject may ebb and flow, the law must be steady, reliable, and even-handed. We know that in the subject of this case, there are people advocating for one outcome or another with intensity, but without the benefit of having heard or seen any evidence at all. The law works in a different way, and the difference is crucial to our system of justice. The jurors selected for this trial will hear and judge the evidence. They will decide what the facts are, and where the evidence is contested, they will determine where the truth lies. Ultimately, the jury will decide whether the Commonwealth has carried its burden of proving that the defendant is guilty of any crime beyond a reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty. People,
I like how she said that, you know, she's basically, she's taking this opportunity knowing that the cameras are going to be on her to say, hey, look, we know that there are some very, very, very strong public opinions out there about this case, but your public opinion is based on not all the facts. And the law doesn't, the law isn't there to wax and wane based on your lack of understanding of the facts and based on the public's need to see a certain outcome. We judge these cases on the facts and the law. And it's unfortunate that these magistrates and judges have to keep reminding the public of this. It's as if they don't learn it in school where they're supposed to learn it. Right?
outside of this building have rights, and we know that they have voices. But this criminal trial will be decided by an independent jury, free from outside interference, based only upon the evidence presented in this courtroom.
And the other thing that kills me about all of this, and I was talking about this earlier. Hey, Harlot. Good morning. Is that this case isn't super unusual. It's not an outstanding case, right? There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other cases like this, I'm sure, working their way through the justice system at this moment that don't have a rabid, YouTube following trying to create a fury of public opinion. And that's the only reason this has gotten the attention that it has. Yeah, there is her car does have that video backup. And my understanding is that somehow either that evidence got lost or wiped off of the camera or something. Oops. I did something I didn't want to do. There we go.
And the law. This is the only way to ensure that every person who comes before the court receives a fair trial. It is just that simple and that important. So while public comment will likely continue, the rule of law will be upheld.
I'm joined today by
Good morning again, Council.
Welcome to Law and Crime. I'm Terry Austin. We have a lot to cover in the next 2 hours, but right now, I want to take a look to a brand new trial starting this week out of Norfolk County, Massachusetts. Defendant Karen Reed is accused of killing her boyfriend, Boston.
Johnny, don't quote me on that. I'm not totally sure that there is that evidence. But that car, the car that she drives that was used, hello, Jamie Lee, the car that was used in the commission of this crime did have that capability. And my understanding, and anybody else who's been following this closer can correct me if I'm wrong, is that somehow that evidence doesn't exist for one reason or another that seems sketchy. But I agree that this case, there's something weird about it, and whether there's already something weird about it when there's like this rabid group of citizens going and picketing every single hearing and trial, and when a propagandist is harassing witnesses, that makes things weird in the first place. But there's also something weird on the police side as well, and it's really hard to put our finger on it, So I don't think it's as bad as Turtle Boy and his followers make it, but they might have their finger on something, and that's how most conspiracies are germinated. There's some kernel of truth that gets expanded and expanded and expanded and expanded. And the reason people believe it is because there's a kernel of truth in it, right? Or it might be a little bit believable.
Police officer John O'Keefe in January 2022. After a night of heavy drinking, prosecutors argue they read she backed her SUV into the victim and let him die in a snowbank outside his friend's house. On the other hand, Reed's defense team believes she's being framed in a massive cover-up orchestrated by both witnesses and law enforcement. And keep in mind that a federal investigation concluded that the victim's injuries were not consistent with having been hit by a car. Reed faces charges of second-degree murder, vehicle manslaughter while intoxicated.
See, that's something I hadn't heard is that there is an investigation that shows that his injuries are not consistent with that of somebody who was hit by a car. So, but on the other hand, so for those of you who don't know, there's a lot of conversation about the taillights from her car being broken. And there's testimony that some of the, fiberglass from or glass from the taillight was found in John O'Keefe's clothes. So using a third defense, you mean in this case, Jamie Lee? I'm not sure about using a third defense.
And leaving the scene of a collision. If convicted, she faces life in prison. A final pretrial hearing took place Friday ahead of this week's jury selection, and the prosecution argued to redact the cause of death from the victim's death certificate. So let's hear how that went.
So, Your Honor, this is the Commonwealth's motion to preclude reference and redact the manner of death contained on the victim's death certificate. This is a routine motion the Commonwealth files in really respect to any case. Manner of death.
That's not persuasive, so go ahead.
No. And I'm just, manner of death as illuminated in the motion is not something that is typically something that is permissible to be testified to from anybody to the jury, because that's sort of the question of liability ultimately that is left to their discretion as far as how they find the facts. But cause of death obviously is something that is a medical determination. Manner of death, as the court is well aware, is there are essentially 3 or 4 different selections, and they fall into different categories. They don't necessarily mean in the medical context what they might mean in the legal context. So for that just sort of simple differentiation of meaning between the two, manner of death is not something that the Commonwealth feels is appropriate for the court, for any witness to be testifying to as far as the jury is concerned, as that's a question for them ultimately to determine. And for those reasons, the Commonwealth would ask that this motion be allowed.
Thank you, Your Honor. The medical examiner who completed the death certificate in this case concluded that the manner of death was undetermined. The Commonwealth now seeks to have that portion of the death certificate redacted because it is quite clearly exculpatory. All of the cases cited by the Commonwealth deal with the issue of whether it was error for the Commonwealth to admit a death certificate listing the manner of death as a homicide, because it violates a defendant's right to due process and a fair trial under the 5th, 16th, and 14th Amendments to the United States Constitutions. None of the cases cited by the Commonwealth stand for the proposition that a medical examiner's determination that the manner of death is undetermined should be redacted.
Can I just make a petty observation about about how these things are broadcast and the fact that they had the wrong name up about her for quite some time before they brought it down.
In fact, the Commonwealth cites Commonwealth versus Ellis at 373 Mass 1, It's a 1977 case for the proposition that excluding the word undetermined is the better and safer course. But that's a misstatement of the law, and I would urge the court to read the Supreme Judicial Court's opinion in that case. What it actually says is this, quote, "Nothing contained in the record of a death which has reference to the question of liability for causing death shall be admissible in evidence. The better and safer course is to exclude from a death certificate the words homicide, suicide, or accident in a criminal trial." Notably missing from that list of words that the Supreme Judicial Court warned about is the word undetermined. That is what the Commonwealth seeks to have redacted here. The Commonwealth bears the burden of proof in this case. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a homicide occurred, and their own medical examiner has opined that she was unable to make that determination. That finding is relevant, it's exculpatory, and there's no authority that supports its redaction.
All right, those are interesting arguments. Joining us to break this down, we have criminal defense attorney Sky Lazaro and civil rights attorney Adante Pointer. Sky, I'm going to start with you. Now, the judge took the ruling under advisement, but if you were in the judge's shoes, how would you rule on this issue?
It's an interesting issue where it's undetermined instead of a more prejudicial word such as homicide or suicide, things like that. I think undetermined is less hurtful or less prejudicial, but it's hard to say what she'll do in it. It is notable, I think, that those words are specifically, or that word is excluded from the Supreme Court ruling.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think the prosecution just wants it to say nothing, basically, because undetermined might rule in favor of the defense. All right, Adante, I'm going to get back to you on the other side, but first, let's take a look at portions of another argument involving a third-party culprit defense.
The investigators in this case, Your Honor, including Michael Proctor, kept Colin Albert's name completely out of the police report. When this case began, I had no idea who Colin Albert was. I received a tip right from the jump that Brian Albert and his nephew had beaten up John O'Keefe. I didn't even know Brian Albert had a nephew at that time. But after receiving the tip, I learned of the conflict that Colin Albert had with John O'Keefe, so I sent a letter to Mr. Lally, I believe by certified mail. I knew that the DA's office was planning to present evidence or witnesses to a grand jury, and at that early juncture, before anybody had asked them to indict, I notified the DA of 3 potential suspects, the ones that I'm talking about now: Brian Higgins, Brian Albert, and Colin Albert. After he received that letter at our next court appearance, I'm sure Mr. Lally can confirm this, he acknowledged that both Brian Albert and Brian Higgins would be testifying or had testified before the grand jury, but he questioned why I included Colin Albert in my letter. He told me at the time that he had no evidence that Colin Albert was there that night. However, after receiving my letter, lo and behold, multiple witnesses testified that Colin Albert was at 34 Fairview the night of January 28th to 29th. And now the DA will argue, I'm sure, at trial, that he left before John O'Keefe arrived. We don't find their evidence compelling. We don't accept it. We are not required to accept their theory of the case. We're entitled to present a defense. His presence at 34 Fairview gave him the opportunity, along with the motive, to harm John O'Keefe. With regard to Brian Albert, Your Honor, this is a well-connected, well-known, powerful family in the town of Canton, Massachusetts. Brian Albert.
So it sounds like this is the third defense that you're talking about, Jamie Lee. This is the argument that they were making.
Was present at that home when Colin Albert was there. Colin Albert is a member of the Albert family. He's nephew of Brian Albert. We have evidence that Brian Albert had expressed hostility toward John O'Keefe as well. And we know that he initiated a phone call with Brian Higgins at 2:22 in the morning. He reached out to Brian Higgins.
First, again, what the case law requires is evidence and not just mere speculation, or saying that you have evidence is not actually evidence. I do find it somewhat interesting that Mr. Yannetti wrote apparently 4.5 pages of notes, but didn't have time to write a motion to admit the evidence that he claims that he has. He references in regard to third-party culprit, Dr. Sheridan, who indicated that the injuries are consistent with the fight. He's the same doctor who indicated that the injuries on Mr. O'Keefe's arm were consistent with the dog bite, which was then refuted by the DNA findings from UC Davis, as well as the fact that the injuries are only on one side of the arm. And last time I checked, dogs have teeth on the top and the bottom, and there's no injuries to the bottom of Mr. O'Keefe's arm. Furthermore, the counsel references the federal grand jury materials in which I would say, as has been done numerous times previously, is severely mischaracterized as to what they actually contain. And it's not a crash reconstruction as it's been alleged here before, it's a biomechanical engineer. And essentially what they did was take painstaking lengths to go to determine that the defendant's vehicle did not strike Mr. O'Keefe in the back of the head, which is simply something that no one has ever said, intimated at any point ever.
All right, great arguments on both sides. I still have Sky and Dante. Dante, this one is for you. The defense presented 3 potential culprits for their defense of the case, and they think they have the right and sufficient evidence to actually present this theory to the jury. What do you think the judge should do here?
I think the judge has to let it in. You know, if you have evidence exculpatory evidence that you think that shows the jury and proves up that you're not the one that's responsible for this death, then I think you should be entitled to present that evidence to the jury. And frankly, that's what a defense attorney is supposed to do. Muddy the water, point the jury in the direction of the culprit, or at least show that your client is not.
But don't they have to show real evidence? That's my question. Real evidence.
Not the one, and that there's not sufficient evidence beyond a reasonable doubt to hold them accountable. The defense is doing a good job.
Exactly. And Sky, when you have someone else to point the finger to, it's better than just saying, well, the prosecution didn't prove its case. And do you think the judge is actually going to allow it in?
I think they have to. I think in a case like this where they're actually presenting, sufficient argument that, isn't just speculative, it has to come in. Otherwise, there's a good chance that, this case may come back on appeal.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I'm not a lawyer or a judge, but I agree with that too. Karen Reed should get a vigorous defense. All defendants should get a vigorous defense. And agree, you shouldn't be entitled to drag innocent persons' names through the mud. So that's why they need real evidence when they're trying to implicate other people. Oh, the ruling came in on this a bit ago. I think actually they might have talked about it in one of the previous clips I showed. And I think she ruled against it, but don't quote me on that because I had to step away for a moment while I was playing that to take care of biological needs. Oh, it's on Twitter. Okay. Yeah, let's take a little trip over to Twitter land. As much as I don't like it over there anymore. Oh, actually, forget. Never mind on that. I keep forgetting I need to do something before I go over to Twitter when I'm streaming. Yeah, if the judge doesn't let in, things that are, new arguments that are based on real evidence, then it could be appealed. So I think that's only fair, but it has to be real evidence, It can't just be, oh, here's another one we're trying to throw the book at.
I think the judge has to let it in. And when you have...
Oh, I think maybe we're back in... We have sound, but we don't have picture. Back in Chad Daybell trial. We're back on Chad.
All right, I'll request the bailiffs now bring the jurors back in, please.
Okay, so it is allowed with stipulations, right? Yeah, that's okay. Okay, it's allowed. So I was wrong in my very rudimentary hearing of what they said. Hopefully everyone in the courtroom in Chad Daybell's trial are refreshed. Narrow stipulations. You know, so Chad's sitting there in front of a computer. Does he have access to the internet on that computer? I kind of doubt it, but I'm sure he's probably it's just for him to look at exhibits and things like that. But it just makes me a little nervous seeing Chad in front of a computer. Hope you all are doing okay in the chat. Hope you're having a nice day so far. Lori. You mean Melanie Phibb? Yeah, Melanie Phibb. So for Lori's trial, the way Melanie Gibb arrived for that trial was honestly hilarious. Let me see if I can find a picture of that, because she arrived as if she was like Taylor Swift needing to be disguised. She had on this big, huge hat. Yeah, here it is. Jeez. I'm uploading the picture right now. The way she showed up to trial was, my goodness.
The jury is present and accounted for.
All right, thank you. Please be seated.
I'm having to delete other images to make room.
All right, we are back on the record now on KCR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. Just concluded our mid-morning recess. And just before that, Ms. Blake, Exhibit 49 had been admitted. Detective Duncan is still on the stand under oath, and if you'd like to continue your direct, you may do that.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state would ask to publish State's Exhibit 49.
All right, you are allowed to do that.
I just wonder if she still thinks she has to arrive at trial like this. Did that sun hat really help her being disguised? We knew it was her. Jeez.
And Detective Duncan, we've already talked about, but just to remind the jurors, the information contained in this PowerPoint was from Charles Vallow's phone. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And on this slide, can you please read this into the record?
Yes, I can. Hello, Chad. I hope you are doing well. This is Charles Vallow from Arizona. We really enjoyed having you stay with us back in November when you came to the Preparing a People conference. I appreciated you taking the time to talk to me about the book I've been working on. Well, more than 6 months later, I still haven't made much progress on it, but I feel an urgency to get it done. As the managing partner of Right Planning Group, I'm going to have the opportunity to speak at various conventions beginning in the fall, but everyone says I need to have a book available that summarized my life and shares the principles I follow. So I will cut to the chase. I'm willing to pay you well to help me get this book into shape as my ghostwriter. I really liked your autobiography and the tone you took in sharing experiences without preaching. Is there any way you could come here for a couple of days and help me get the book underway? I feel talking in person would be much more valuable than a phone call or video chat mainly because I would like you to read through some of my journals and explain to me how the publishing industry works. It would help me know whether I truly have a book in me and whether you want to team up on it. I played minor league baseball and have plenty of stories that my audience could relate to, along with the knowledge I've gained running my own company. So I do feel the book would contain valuable information even beyond the convention circuit. I'm out of town until Sunday, but I would gladly fly you down here next week before the holiday and cover your expenses. You could stay in our guest room like before, or in a hotel if you prefer. I hate to take you away from your family, but I know this book is vital to my speaking success. I understand if you don't want to take part in the project, but I would definitely make it worth your time. With admiration, Charles.
And through your investigation, what did you learn in relation to this email or this message, if anything?
So this particular message was a document that, in looking at Charles' additional phone records, he had indicated to Lori, as well as to Lori's brother, Adam Cox, that he had found this on Lori's computer. This would have been the first letter to which he mentioned Chad or suspected Lori of having an affair with Chad.
And at some point, were you able to learn if this particular email was associated with a specific email address?
It was not.
And did you learn whether or not this was actually written by Charles?
All indications in Charles's phone and content that when he's sending this to Adam and to Lori is this was fictitious and this was not created by him.
And just to back up a little bit, as you're going through these extractions, were you aware of any other ongoing investigations that were related to what you were looking into?
Yes, in January of 2020, when going through these extractions, I was aware of multiple investigations. I was aware of the disappearance of JJ and Tylee. I was also aware of the attempted or the shooting on Tammy Daybell, as well as Tammy Daybell's death. In addition to that, there is another case in Gilbert, Arizona, with the attempted shooting at Brandon Boudreaux.
And as you were looking through this phone extraction as well as others, were you also paying attention or looking for anything in relation to those other investigations that you thought could be helpful?
Yes, while going through these records, this particular record and subsequent records, I was mainly focusing on the Charles Vallow investigation, but anything that I saw that could have been pertinent to the locating JJ and Tylee and the other investigations, I would pass that along to other investigators in Idaho.
And as we talk through this, just to make clear to the jury, do you know how many, did Lori have a brother named Adam Cox?
Yes, she did.
Did he also have a brother named Alex Cox, or did she also have a brother named Alex Cox?
Yes, she did.
Was Adam Cox at any point a suspect in relation to this investigation?
He was not.
Was he someone that you learned had communications with Charles?
Yes.
Was Alex Cox a suspect?
Yes, he was.
Thank you. And if we look at the next slide, can you read these messages into the record?
Yeah, so these are messages that were found on Charles Vallow's phone extractions. The first message is from Charles to Lori, dated June 29, 2019 at 5:51 a.m. Is he with whom you're having an affair? He did not stay with us in Arizona in November. Who are you lying to now? Trying to destroy another family? You're evil. Period. I may take JJ back to Houston unless you have a great explanation for all of this. I will not let him be a party to your apostasy. The next message from Charles to Lori, June 29, 2019 at 6:04 a.m. Just so you know, I have Tammy, Chad's wife, email address. I will send a copy of my email you sent to KK Walker. Tammy will know what you're up to. You better explain. Charles then writes, June 29, 2019 at 6:10 a.m. I now have Tammy Daybell's cell number. I'll text her a copy of the letter and an explanation of what you're up to. You have till noon your time to explain, or I'm sending via text and email to her. And finally, Charles to Lori on June 29th at 6:55 a.m. I'm sure you're up by now. You have until 10 a.m. your time to respond, or I send the emails and texts to Tammy.
And at the time these emails are being exchanged, Charles is still alive, obviously,
Yes, he is.
and Tammy Daybell is still alive.
Yes,
And you had recovered that previous email that we talked about.
correct.
And that email appears to have been written by someone holding themselves out to be Charles to Chad Daybell.
Correct.
Through your investigation, did you learn whether or not Charles actually made contact or attempted to make contact with Tammy?
I did, yes.
And what did you learn in relation to that?
So again, looking at Charles' phone, there is indication that Charles had addressed emails to Tammy Daybell and sent those emails to her.
Do you know, or did you learn whether or not Tammy ever looked at those or received them?
There's no indication that she looked at them or received them.
And looking to the next slide.
Once again, Charles to Lori, June 29th, 12:23 p.m. Just so you know, and Chad know, I am going to talk to Tammy in person if I have to. I've already emailed and texted her, your game is up. Charles sends another message to Lori the same day at 5:04 p.m. Please stop spending money on the credit cards. I appreciate it.
And this is a continuation, it appears, from the conversation we were just looking at in the previous slide.
Yes, it is.
And we talked about any indication that Charles did in fact email Tammy. Did you uncover anything in your investigation regarding whether or not he ever attempted to visit her in person?
I did not.
And so we don't know, no evidence that he did.
Correct.
And looking at this date of June 29th, this is just a few weeks before Charles is shot and killed. Is that correct?
Correct.
And turning to the next slide, when we talk about the email, is this the one you were referencing?
Yes, it is.
And could you read this into the record?
So the first email from Charles Vallow to Tammy Daybell, and it was sent to tdaybell@sugarsalem.com on June 29th, 2019 at 9:06 is the stamp that was on the email. Tammy, my name is Charles Vallow. I have some vital and disturbing information regarding your husband and my wife, Lori. This is your work email, so I'll wait to send you the evidence that is very disturbing. You may call or email me from the address where you can receive the information. I apologize to be the one sending this, but something has to be done. I feel it's best if I shed some light on this issue. Regards, Charles Vallow, 714-853-5005.
And it looks like there's another one, or this may be the subject line. Could you read that next one?
Correct. The email from Charles to Tammy Daybell, coming from Charles Wright Planning Group email to another email for Tammy is tammy.daybell@gmail.com, June 30th. So the following day, 2019 at 10:16 a.m. The subject line on this email was your husband and my wife, and then the body are having an affair. Her name is Lori Vallow. I've got definite proof or definitive proof. If you care to see it, contact me and I'll share it with you. It's devastating, I know, but the truth needs to be shown. Charles Vallow.
And again, to be clear, through your investigation, you were never able to determine, or you did not learn whether or not Tammy actually saw these emails.
Correct.
And then can you talk about what we're seeing on this slide here?
This is another email from Charles Vallow, a Gmail account to chad.daybell@gmail.com. sent 6/29/2019 at 9:32 a.m. The email reads, Chad, I'm Lori's husband, but I gathered you already knew this. She sent an email yesterday, supposedly written by me, to KK Walker, inviting you to Arizona next week and to ghostwrite a book I'm supposedly working on. It's preposterous. I happened to run across it as she left her computer at our Houston home. I am not paying anybody for anything, and I am not writing a book. Either you or Lori need to tell me what's going on, or this will be exposed for all to see. Regards, Charles Vallow, 714-853-5005. And does your wife know you have several of Lori's dance videos? Explain how that is in any way appropriate. She sent them to you at your request in January, Charles.
And relating back to that first email, when we talk about the belief it wasn't drafted by Charles, did this play into why you believed that it was not drafted by him?
Yes, it did.
Is there anything else about this that drew your attention?
So this, obviously, Charles mentions a KK Walker, an email sent to KK Walker. So through this information, we were able to locate the KK Walker account of KK Walker 75 at yahoo.com.
And ultimately, were you able to link that KK Walker email to any particular person?
Yes.
And who was that?
Lori Vallow.
And if we look at this next slide, if you can tell us a little bit about what we're seeing and read that.
So also again on the actual Charles Vallow's device and the extraction from that device is a message from Charles to Lori on June 30th, 2019 at 8:42. Lori, I know you don't care much. I know you don't much care how I feel, but just imagine this. How could my actions or breaking your heart result in what you've done? You accuse me of infidelity, but it's you who have been having an affair. It just keeps killing me. Maybe that's your goal. How can you live with yourself destroying our life, Mel and Brandon's, probably Mel and Brendan too. Now add Chad Daybell family and you've got a home run. The fact that you continue to go to the temple after all you've done shocks even me. There really is something wrong with you. I really don't want to do what I have to do, but you have to be exposed for what you really are. You won't even deny it or talk to me as to your reasons. That's what's amazing to me. You could allay some of what's about to happen, but I don't think you will. Lying has become second nature to you. You have been impressive in blaming me for all that's happened. You have destroyed me. I've never been lower in my life. It's you that has done it. Please tell me why, please. I will slow or minimize what's about to happen. It's you who has caused it. We have a son to raise, but that's all we have in common. I will work with you in his best interest and will be there Monday evening. You owe me an apology for all the false accusations you've made. You know I've been entirely faithful to you since the first day we met. I deserve an apology from you. Please respect that much.
So this message is sent around the same time the messages are being sent to Chad confronting him about the affair, correct?
Correct.
And this is also sent around the same time Charles reaches out to Tammy.
Correct.
Through your investigation, did you learn whether or not there were any divorce proceedings that had been going on between Charles and Lori?
I was not aware of any.
Do you know through your investigation, did you learn if at times they had separated?
There was indication that they were separating, living in different locations, yes.
And on this next slide, can you talk a little bit about what we're seeing here and then read these into the record?
Yes, once again, additional messages found on Charles Vallow's device. Charles to Lori, July 1st, 2019, 10:31. I'm going to Idaho first to meet with Tammy Daybell. Lori to Charles, July 1st, 2019, 10:32. a.m. She won't see you. She is my friend. She won't listen to you. Go ahead. You're ridiculous. Are you coming to JJ for the 4th or not? Charles to Lori, July 1st, 2019 at 10:37 a.m. Then you tell me why you used my name and a fictitious email to send a BS email about a book I am having him ghostwrite for me. It's fraud and a lie. There's no other reason for it other than to get him to Arizona or AZ, get him in AZ and have an excuse for his wife. Charles to Lori, July 1st, 2019, 10:38 a.m. You did this. I had nothing to do with it, and you know it. Also, he did not stay with us in November. I will find out.
Did you learn what that reference of he did not stay with us in November was in regards to?
That was in regards to the letter found on the Chad's device, and then also another, what is a KK Walker email where Chad was being requested to come to Houston. I believe those were the two.
And one of the emails referenced him being in Arizona the previous November,
Correct.
and that would have been November of 2018.
Correct.
And there's also a response there from Lori saying she's friends with Tammy.
Yes.
Did you also review data in relation to devices or accounts linked to Lori Vallow?
I did.
In your review of those, did you find any communications between Lori and Tammy?
I did not.
Any indication that they were friends in those devices, at least?
No.
Did you find communications between Lori and Chad?
I did.
And on this next slide, can you talk a little bit about what we're seeing here and then read it into the record?
So once again, in Charles Vallow's actual phone extraction, the day of his murder, and these text messages take place between 7:35 a.m. and 7:37 a.m. between Charles and Adam Cox, who was Lori's brother. Charles sent Adam a text, "Al is here." Adam responded, "At Lori's?" Adam responds, "Really? I wonder why he never called me back." Adam responds, "They're planning something." Charles responded, "Absolutely." Adam responded, "I was supposed to spend the night at his house last night. She probably blocked that." Charles responds, "What you do is up to you."
And up until this slide, or actually, excuse me, just the slide before this, we're talking the beginning of July when he and Lori are exchanging those messages. Is that correct?
So from June 29th was when that letter was discovered and the communication starts. So up until then, yeah, or from that day on, yes.
And you indicated this is the day that Charles is killed when these messages are exchanged.
Yes, it was.
And again, Adam Cox is one of Lori's brothers,
Yes,
and he was not a suspect, correct?
correct.
And when we look at the time that these are exchanged, it's early in the morning.
Yes.
Were there any additional communications on Charles' phone after this?
There were not.
Charles was shot and killed shortly after these messages were exchanged.
Correct.
And we've talked a little bit about that you reviewed. And actually, I apologize. I'll get this submitted to the court first.
I'm sort of anticipating Pryor's cross-examination on this because.
And we've already discussed a little bit that as part of your
apart.
investigation, you also reviewed some accounts associated with Lori Vallow.
Yes.
Did those include some iCloud accounts?
2 of them were, yes.
And do you recall what those iCloud accounts were?
So the first iCloud account that Lori used was Lori 4 style, the number 4. So Lori, the number 4 style at iCloud.com. And from that extraction or from that information, we were able to determine a second iCloud that was created, which is lollytime at iCloud.com.
And in reviewing and specifically looking to that Lori for style, was there a significant amount of information located on that device?
Yes, there was.
Excuse me, on that account or linked to it?
Yes, there is.
And from that information, and then also same question with the lolly time, was there a significant amount of information?
Yes,
And in preparation for your testimony today, did you prepare an exhibit?
I did.
And does that exhibit pull some of the information that caught your attention?
Yes, it does.
And given the amount of information within those accounts, do you believe that it would aid you in your testimony today?
It sure would.
Do you believe it would aid the jury in understanding the evidence as well?
Yes, it would.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask that the witness be shown State's Exhibit 48. I believe defense has a copy as well. And similarly, these are printouts of a PowerPoint, so we have an actual jump drive, but as a courtesy, we printed these out.
I already have it. No objection, Judge.
Okay, I'll just quickly review them.
And Detective Duncan, if you could look through those as well.
All right, I'll note there is no objection to the offered Exhibit 48. The court will admit the exhibit, noting again the actual exhibit's a PowerPoint XLS digital file, and what the court's reviewed is a print-off version of that.
Okay.
And does that appear to be an accurate representation of the PowerPoint?
It does.
Thank you. Your Honor, now that it's been admitted, the state would ask to publish.
You may publish it.
And you talked about the first iCloud account. What are we seeing on this particular slide?
So on this particular slide, I'm showing you the Lori for style at iCloud.com account username. Under this account, these 4 numbers are registered under that account.
And as you went through the account, is that where you located these numbers?
Yes,
And so these are numbers that ended up being associated with Lori Vallow, is that correct?
that is correct.
And looking at the next slide, can you tell us what we're seeing here and then read the messages into the record?
Yeah, so on the iCloud account, Lori for style, the following messages were seen between Lori Vallow and Alex Cox. On 3/9/2019 at 11:27 hours, Lori sent Alex a text that says, apparently it is tied to Ned being gone. There's an emoji in there, but the emoji is not included. Hopefully today or tomorrow. On 3/10/2019 at 8:41 in the morning, Alex sent Lori a message. Love you too. Have fun and get rid of Ned already. 3/26/2019 at 17:36 hours, Alex sent Lori a message. Ned is still alive, just confirmed. 3/26/2019 at 18:17 or 6:17 p.m., Lori sends Alex a message. It's not Ned, and it's a new one.
What about those messages caught your attention?
So in the weeks and months following the death of Charles Vallow, we received information that Charles was possibly killed by Alex because he was a dark spirit or a zombie. The name Ned is a name that even Charles would tell people that Lori was referring to him as. So the name Ned is the dark spirit's name that was given to Charles Vallow.
And in that last message, we see reference to it's not Ned, it's a new one. Did you learn anything in relation to what that message may have been referencing?
To me, and
Judge, I'm going to object. That calls for speculation.
I'll sustain that.
Through the investigation, you reviewed other phone records.
yes,
And did you discuss the investigation with other individuals involved in it?
yes,
And did you review reports and interviews?
yes,
And based on your review of that through your investigation, were you able to make a determination as to what that may have been referencing?
yes.
Judge, and I'm going to renew my objection that it's speculation.
And Your Honor, if I may respond.
Go ahead, Ms. Blake.
Your Honor, I think under the collective knowledge doctrine, the officer's already established that if he can answer from his investigation what he believed it to mean, and it in relation to, although I haven't heard it, any hearsay, I think under the collective knowledge doctrine, it's not being offered for the truth of the matter. It's being offered as to what the officer determined in the investigation.
All right. Well, go ahead, Mr. Pryor.
May I respond? Judge, using that notion that it's as part of the investigation, it still calls for this officer to make a guess as to exactly what is meant by a particular phrase. So regardless of the investigation, regardless of whether he's looked at documents, he's still guessing. He's speculating, he's hunching, and he's not able to do that, and he's not allowed to do that.
All right. Well, there's been some additional foundation laid. At this point, I am still going to continue to sustain the objection, just looking back at the question, which was whether or not the witness was able to make a determination as to what that may have been referencing. So I do think it's speculative at this point, Ms. Blake. Any additional foundation you could lay may change that.
Through your investigation, did you learn if Charles was designated by any other names?
Yes.
And what were those names?
Garrett and Hiplos.
And based on that, what was your belief with regard to it's a new one?
A new entity or a new dark spirit.
Thank you. And looking at this next slide, can you tell us what we're seeing here and then read the messages into the record?
So on the Lori for Style account, you see messages between Nicole Earl and Lori Vallow. These took place on 10/19 of 2019. At 9:18 in the morning, Nicole sent Lori a message. I'm not sure if you heard, but Chad's wife died last night. Lori responded at 9:33 a.m. Oh my gosh, I did not hear that. I'm in Hawaii and it's 6 a.m. Lori responded to Nicole at 9:34 in the morning. Do you know what happened? Nicole responded to Lori at 9:37. Yes, she awoke in the night coughing, threw up, collapsed, and passed away.
Through your investigation, did you learn on what day Tammy Daybell was pronounced dead?
Yes.
And what day was that?
October 19th, 2019.
So the same day these messages are exchanged.
Yes.
And we talked before that as you were looking through these, you were also cognizant of some other active investigations.
Correct.
Did you pass this information along to other law enforcement?
Yes.
And looking at the next slide, can you tell us what we're seeing here and then read it into the record?
Once again, these are messages between Melanie Gibb and Lori Vallow on the Lori for Style account on 10/19/2019. Melanie Gibb sent Lori a message at 1:16 p.m. I heard what happened to Chad's wife. Oh my gosh. Lori responded to Melanie at 1:18. Hello, what?
So on that last slide, we saw communications between Lori and Nicole Earl that took place in the morning hours of October 19th, correct?
Yes, correct.
And now on this slide, later in the day, these are messages between Melanie Gibb and Lori Vallow.
Yes.
And what was it about these messages that caught your attention?
What caught my attention is the communication between Melanie Gibb and Lori Vallow, indicating that Lori was unaware that Tammy had passed away.
And that's even though there were the messages with Nicole Earl earlier in the day.
Yes.
And on the next slide, can you tell us what we're seeing and then read it into the record?
So on the Lori for Style account, on November 22nd, 2019, a text message is present from Lori Vallow to Colby Ryan, who is Lori's son. I text Ty to send it, but I haven't heard back yet. She will probably just do it before she tells me. Hope you got the Venmo. Ty said she sent it late. I'll call you when I get a break. Hope you're having a great day. I love you so much.
And in this message, were you, based on your investigation, did you know who Ty was that they were referring to?
Yes,
And who was that?
Kylie Ryan.
Did you learn when the last known sighting of Tylee was?
I believe it was the beginning of September 2019.
So this message is sent months after the last known sighting.
Yes.
And then you had indicated you also looked at another iCloud account.
Yes, so from the Lori for Style account led us to the lollytime@icloud.com. This information provided indicated that this particular account was created on July 1st, 2019. And the cell phone numbers listed are the numbers that are attached to that account.
So this particular account was created just 10 days before Charles is killed.
Yes.
And again, during this time, Tammy is still alive. Is that correct?
Yes.
Turning to the next slide, can you tell us what we're seeing here and then read it into the record?
Yes, this is communication found on this iCloud account between Lori Vallow and Alex Cox. On July 9th, 2019 at 1:49 p.m., Lori sent Alex a message stating, "So the plot thickens. Call me when you can." She sends another message to another message to Alex Cox, 7/9/2019 at 9:50 p.m. Getting sleepy, so I'm going to need you to stay close to me the next couple days. Mel too. She can't go to Utah. They are planking some kind of intervention, but want Mel out of the way, so I'm left alone. I need to come get the stuff at your house tomorrow and secure it. Lots to do. Thank you for standing by me. It's all coming to a head this week. I will be like Nephi, I am told, and so will you.
And when these messages are copied over, do you copy them over as written?
Yes, I do.
So some may contain spelling errors.
Correct.
And the only difference is you did not include the emojis.
Correct.
What is it about these messages that stuck out to you?
This is 2 days before Charles would have died. Also, in looking at Charles Vallow's account, Charles was talking with Adam Cox about planning some sort of intervention, if you would, and talking to Lori about her radical beliefs and the letters that he had found. So this stood out to me as some sort of plan that was taking place.
And again, this is just 2 days before Alex shoots and kills Charles Vallow.
Yes.
Were you able to determine who the Mel is that's being referenced in that second text?
That is Melanie Boudreau.
And who is she in relation to Lori Vallow?
That is Lori's niece.
And then moving to the next slide, can you tell us what we're seeing here and then read the messages into the record?
So what you're seeing here is oftentimes in what appears in an iCloud or what doesn't appear in an iCloud, you can capture in an actual phone record. Phone records and phone extractions are different. Phone extraction it's a copy of the actual device, where a phone record or a phone, they call them call detail records, are actual phone calls, text messages that are sent, and records are retained by the actual phone carrier. So in looking at a timeline of Charles Vallow's death, I was able to look at Lori Vallow's phone call detail records, and I noticed that there were phone or messages, text messages between Lori and Chad the day of Charles Vallow's murder. The times are at 6:12 a.m., 7:01 a.m., and 7:33 a.m. There's a record that this text occurred, but there's no content of what the actual text is.
And through your investigation, were you able to determine a span of time in which you believe Charles Vallow to have been shot?
Yes.
And when was that?
Based on our investigation, you look at the record of Adam Cox and the last message sent by Chad and Adam, 7:37. So he arrives at the residence based on location data on Chad's phone.
And sorry to interrupt. I think you said Chad's phone. Do you mean
I
Charles?
apologize. On Charles' phone. So Charles Vallow had location data on his phone, so it shows when he arrives. So it's around that 7:30 time frame that Charles arrived at the Four Peaks address, and then obviously the call placed by Alex Cox at 8:36 indicating the shots. So somewhere between the 7:30 and 8:30 time frame.
And so these messages with Chad are essentially stopped just before Charles arrives or around the same time.
Correct.
And then turning to the next slide, can you tell us what we're seeing here and then read them into the record?
So these are text messages between Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell, and the text messages were on July 18th, 2019. Lori sent Chad a message. I just got the letter from the insurance company saying that I am not the beneficiary. It's a spear through my heart. Who do you think he changed it to? Brandon or probably Kay? He left nothing for JJ. Chad responded to Lori, wow, that's terrible. There's no way to find out. Lori responded to Chad, I might be able to see when I get his computer on Sunday. I could check the emails sent to the insurance company. It will show change of beneficiary. He must have done it recently. Chad sent Lori a message. It seemed you would have had to agree to the change. Maybe your name was forged. You should have a good paper trail to prove it.
And then going to the next slide, is this a continuation of that conversation?
Yes, it is.
Would you please read those into the record?
Chad sent Lori a message stating, I love you. This is terrible, but it is probably another step in bringing down the Gadiantons, especially Brandon. Lori sent Chad a message to Chad. Nope, he can change it anytime he wants. He's the agent and anyone can change their beneficiary anytime with their own signature. I'm thinking it must be Kay. Chad sent a message to Lori. It will be interesting if it got changed after he had 2 bullets in his chest.
So these messages were exchanged just 7 days after Charles was shot and killed.
Correct.
What was it about these messages that stood out to you?
Obviously, what stood out is the Lori's concern with beneficiary money from a life insurance policy that she felt was coming to her after Charles's death.
And at the time these messages were exchanged, had Arizona publicly released how, or if you recall, had they released how Charles had been killed?
I don't recall.
But it's just 7 days after.
Correct.
And the indication to you was at the time Charles was killed, Lori would have believed she was getting insurance money.
Yes.
Did it also appear Chad would have believed that?
Judge objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Looking at the next slide, can you tell us what we're seeing here and read it into the record?
So this is another message on the Lori time, I believe. Lori Vallow to Chad Daybell, 7/18/2019 at 12:19 hours. Lori says, so I talked to the insurance company. He changed it in March. So it was probably Ned before we got rid of him. They can't tell me to who, of course, but it's done. I still get the $4,000 a month from SS.
Did you learn through your investigation what the SS stood for?
Yes.
And what was that?
Social Security.
And did you learn through the investigation whether or not Lori was getting Social Security money or if her kids were?
Yes, she was. Yes.
And looking at this next one, can you tell us what we're seeing here and read it into the record?
This is a message from Chad to Lori on 7/26/2019 at 8:13 p.m. Tonight I figured out who I feel like. I'm a grown-up version of Harry Potter who has to live with the Dudleys in his little space under the stairs. Every few weeks I get to escape and have an amazing adventure with my goddess lover. But then I have to return to my place under the stairs, feeling trapped. But I sense permanent freedom is coming.
And this message would have been just 15 days after Charles' death.
Yes.
And was Sammy Daybell alive at this time?
Yes.
And then turn to the next message. If you could let us know what we're seeing here and then read it into the record.
So on 7/30/2019, Chad sent a message to Lori. An SMS message is just a text message that read, I got the inspiration to go back to my original death percentages that help us track Charles, Ned, etc. Tammy is very close. Her percentage has fallen steadily since Hiplos left. It is encouraging.
And through your investigation, I think you've already talked to us about it, but did you learn who Ned and Hiplos were referring to?
Yes.
And who was that?
And those were dark spirits that Ned and Hiplos and Garrett were dark spirit names referring to Charles Vallow.
And in this, there's reference to helped us, correct?
That's what I see, yes.
And this was from Chad to Lori?
Yes.
And then on this next slide, can you tell us what we're seeing here and then read it into the record?
So on this account was a text messages between Alex Cox and Lori Vallow, September 3rd, 2019 at 10:02 a.m. Alex to Lori, network name is anti-layman. PW is too many kids. Lori to Alex, funny.
And through the investigation, did you learn the last known sighting of Tylee was around September 8th?
Correct.
And the last known sighting of JJ was around September 22nd?
Correct.
And this message was sent on September 3rd?
Yes, it was.
So when the kids were still around?
Yes.
Your Honor, that exhibit is ready to be submitted to the court.
Very well. Thank you, Ms. Blake.
As part of your investigation, did you also review content from an individual named Zulema Pastenis's phone?
Yes, I did.
And you've already referenced and talked about looking into content on Lori's iCloud accounts, correct?
Correct.
And we just saw some of that.
Yes.
In looking at Zulema's phone and some of the iCloud accounts, did you end up creating another exhibit?
I did, yes.
And again, given was the content of Zulema's phone voluminous?
It was, yes.
And were you able to determine certain messages that you felt had evidentiary or that you felt were relevant to today's proceedings?
I did.
Do you believe that they would assist you in your testimony today?
Yes,
Do you believe they would assist the jury in understanding the evidence as well?
they would.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask that the witness be shown State's Exhibit 51. And similar to the last, these are printouts of a PowerPoint presentation. The actual exhibit would be a jump drive.
Very well.
And Detective Duncan, would you just look through those?
Okay.
Do those appear to be an accurate representation of the PowerPoint you created?
They are.
Your Honor, the state would move for admission of State's Exhibit 51.
No objection, Judge.
All right, Exhibit 51 is admitted. And again, that is the digital file on the thumb drive. The court has received a printed copy as well.
And backing up a little bit, in your investigation, because we've used the name Zulema Pastenis.
Yes.
Through your investigation, did you learn who Zulema Pastenis is?
Yes, through our investigation, we learned that Zulema Pastenis was a friend of Lori Vallows.
And do you know if Zulema Pastenis eventually was married to someone related to Lori?
She was. Eventually, she would marry Alex Cox.
And we talked a little bit about Ned and dark spirits. Did those kind of things come up through your investigation?
Yes, they did.
And in looking in Zulema's phone, was there reference to things of that nature?
Yes, there were.
Your Honor, I would ask permission to publish State's Exhibit 51.
You may.
And looking at this slide, can you tell us what we're seeing and then read it into the record?
Yes, so on Zulema Pastenis' phone, an extraction that was actually done by the Gilbert Police Department. I reviewed this phone content and I saw messages between Lori and Zulema. So on May 29th, 2019 at 10:32 a.m., Lori sent Zulema a message that read, "Perfect. I found out there are 4 One is a level 4 entity. His name is Hiplos. The H is silent. The other 3 are level 3s. Let's do this. And the following message from Lori to Zalima, June 2nd, 2019 at 11:54 a.m. Yes, it does. Let's put some fire energy towards Hiplos now. He is driving now, and today is the day. I can do it spiritually. Let's go to him and hover over the truck till we do it. Are you ready?
And looking at the next slide, if you could tell us what we're seeing here and read these messages into the record.
So the messages continue. July 2nd, 2019 at 7:52 p.m. Zalima sends Lori a message that states, also, I was given instructions today to rip, tear, or burn the aura of Hiplos to let the body energy out so he can't re-enter. There's a message from Chad Daybell to Zalima on July 2nd, 2019 at 8:35 p.m. I am very happy to find out these estates. You and Lolo have doing amazing work. Mother Earth is so grateful to you both. Thank you as well for your help with Hiplos. He is so very close. Chad then sends another message to Zalima on July 13th, 2019 at 9:57 a.m. Hi, Zalima. Yes, I would be happy to give you a blessing, possibly this evening or tomorrow. It's crazy about Charles, but such a relief.
So in looking at that second message from Chad Daybell, there's a reference to Lolo. Did you determine who Lolo was in your investigation?
I did.
And who is that?
Lolo is a nickname for Lori Vallow.
Was there anything else that stood out about that message in relation to your investigation?
On the message, the second message?
Yes, the second message.
That Chad was thanking Zalima for her help with this evil spirit that Charles was referred to.
And this message was sent just 9 days before Charles Vallow was killed?
Yes.
And then looking at the next message, is there anything that stood out to that one about you?
Other than the last sentence, it is crazy about Charles, but such a relief.
Had you looked through these phones and iCloud accounts, did you ever see any indication of grief over the loss of Charles by anyone?
I did not.
And then turning to this next slide, I think you've already talked about the KK Walker. Can you tell us what we're seeing here, though?
Yes. So this is an email that came that we recovered from the KK Walker 75 at yahoo.com address. And this particular email was sent from KK Walker to chad.daybell@gmail.com on April 21st, 2019 at 6:20 a.m. Yes, April 21st, 2019. So the email reads, Dear Brother Daybell, hi, this is Karen from Avow. I contacted you a couple weeks ago to see if you would be willing to come speak to our youth here in Houston, Texas. You said you probably could if there was a way to cover your expenses. Since then, I can't shake the feeling that you need to come share your story, particularly about chasing paradise. We are near the Houston Temple, and this summer our stake is focusing on family history work. My reason for contacting you again is that we have a stake youth conference planned for all day on Saturday, April 27th. The focus is on the temple, and I know you would energize the kids with your stories. We expect about 400 kids to attend, including some parents. I know it is extremely short notice, but is there any chance you could come? A high councilman is currently the main speaker, but he said he would be happy to let you speak instead. My husband and I have been financially blessed and would pay for your flight. We also have a casita attached to our house where you could stay and not be bothered. Also, my daughter mentioned the young single adults would love to put together a fireside on Sunday evening. I realize your main goal is to sell books, and that wouldn't be possible at these events, but I know the interest in your novels would skyrocket here. I'm sorry it's so late. If possible, please let me know as early as possible in the morning so we can include it in the Sunday announcements. Also, we'd want to get your flights booked. If you are able to do both events, we could fly you in Friday, then depart on Monday. Please let me know if this is possible. We would love it. Karen Walker.
And again, who did you link that KK Walker Yahoo to?
So the KK Walker was linked to Lori Vallow. The information provided by Yahoo indicated that the IP address where this account was set up was in Katy, Texas, near where Lori was living at the time. The date of birth associated with the account was a variation of Lori's date of birth, but the phone number linked to the account was the same phone number that Lori would use.
And again, the date on this is April 21st of 2019. Was Charles Vallow still alive at that time?
Yes, he was.
And was Tammy Daybell still alive?
Yes.
Did Chad Daybell respond to this email?
Yes, he did.
And if we look at the next slide, can you tell us what we're seeing here?
This is a response to that email obtained through Yahoo. Hello, Karen. Yes, I will be able to come. So let the wards know. I can talk to you later about arranging the flight, Chad.
And through your investigation, did you learn whether or not Chad did travel to this event, or in response to this email, I should say?
I don't have independent knowledge of whether he did or not.
Did you, in fact, pass your findings along to other law enforcement?
Yes, I did.
And other law enforcement may have followed up on that?
Yes.
And Your Honor, this exhibit is ready for submission to the court.
All right.
Detective Duncan, do you recall being contacted about a call placed to a mortuary?
I do.
And do you recall who contacted you?
Yeah, it was Agent Ricky Wright with the FBI.
And did you end up following up on a call made to a mortuary?
I did.
Did you learn where that mortuary was located?
Yes.
And where was that?
It is the Valley of Sun Mortuary located in the southern portion of Chandler, Arizona.
And did you end up recovering a copy of a recording of the call?
Yes, I did.
And was it actually a two-part recording?
Yes.
And Your Honor, it's my understanding that these exhibits have already been stipulated to by the parties. They've been marked as states 44A and states 45A.
That's correct, Judge.
Okay. And to be clear, explain what they are again, Ms. Blake.
They are a recording of the calls just referenced by the detective.
Okay, so each one of those exhibits contains a digital file of a recording individual?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. 44A and 45A are admitted.
And Your Honor, I do have a copy of those for counsel as well.
Judge, I have copies. Thank you.
Okay.
And I would, now that those are admitted, I would ask to be able to publish those.
You may publish them.
If I may have just one moment, Your Honor.
Third ring answer.
Funeral home?
Hello, my name is Sarah. I'm assisting them with their calls. How can I help you today?
We just had a death in the family and we really don't want anything but a cremation and then to send the cremains to a family in Louisiana. Just a simple, nothing other than a cremation and sending him to his family for a service in Louisiana. So is there any way to know a ballpark price on that?
Yes, and I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Okay, let me transfer you over to the director who can assist you with the pricing. What is your name, please?
It is Chad Daybell.
How do you spell the last name, please?
Dabal, Daybell.
How are you related to the person who passed?
I'm his nephew.
And then also, this is for the Valley of the Suns in Chandler, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, he lives there in Chandler. I live in Iowa, so I'm just trying to help out.
Okay, thank you. Yes, what is your uncle's name for reference, please?
He is John Daybell.
And last name?
Well, Dabal.
Okay.
The same. John.
Do you have a middle name?
Myron.
Myron?
Yeah.
And Chad, what is your phone number in case we get disconnected?
Yeah. This number, 515. I don't actually know my own number. Let me look real quick.
Thank you.
Five 402-0143.
Thank you. Is he at a nursing home, hospital, or residence?
He passed away in a hospital. I don't know the details.
Yeah, it's just for to know, because sometimes it's different if it's a residential or hospital or a nursing home. Okay.
Thinking they're sending him to the medical examiner. I'm not sure. I should have had more information before I called. I'm sorry.
It's okay. All right. Cremation with shipping to which city?
New Orleans. Again.
Okay, one moment, please, Chad. But stay on the line. Let me transfer you over to the director who can assist you with that.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, Chad.
Yeah.
Thank you for holding. I do have the director, Carissa, on the line to further assist you.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
And Your Honor, that was State's Exhibit 44A.
Okay.
And I would now ask to publish State's Exhibit 45A.
You may.
So my name is Chris. I'm a senior director with Valley System Mortuary Cemetery. I understand that your uncle passed away.
Yes. And I'm just starting the process for the family. He didn't have many relatives. I'm his nephew. I live in Iowa. But what they want to do it's sad to see him go. Yeah, I think he's going to the medical examiner. I don't know all the details, but what the family basically wants is just to have him cremated there in Chandler and then have its cremains shipped to New Orleans. And we'll deal with the service later. So just trying to get a ballpark price.
Okay, so for a cremation, we are able to do our cremation for $1,695. Now, what that's going to include is the transportation into our care, the transportation to and from our crematory, our basic professional fees, as well as our crematory fee. Now, there's going to be a couple other charges there for you.
Okay.
So we are going to have death certificates, which are $20 a piece with a processing fee,
Okay.
$15 permit fee,
All right.
and then we're able to do that transfer through the mail for you, and that's $150 fee for you.
Okay. Like UPS or something, I guess.
Okay.
So close, about 2,000 probably, kind of a ballpark, yeah.
Close to, yeah.
Okay. Well, that helps me a lot. I'm going to call one or two others, but I'll get back to you if we come that direction. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. If you need anything else, give me a call.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Could I have a sidebar with council, please?
Yes.
Tiggy girl, that's funny. John Myron Daybell. So while we're listening to that call, it is interesting, you could interpret that call in a couple of ways. You could interpret it as he's the mastermind behind it, or you could interpret it as he's just following Lori's orders. But either way, you have to ask yourself, why is Charles the one making the call to the mortuary on the day of his death? Chad calling himself the nephew of Charles Vallow and trying to understand the costs associated with his burial. Why? Why did he do that? And just for those of you who are curious about DBT, here's a one of the techniques that's taught. The stop skill stands for stop, take a step back, and this is for managing when you feel a panic attack coming on, or just, that fight, flight, freeze notion.
All right, council, we had a sidebar just discussing scheduling here. We're going to go ahead and take the lunch break at this time. I am going to advise the jurors, you're going to have a slightly longer lunch break, maybe not slightly, probably more like an hour and a half than an hour, based on some motions the court's going to hear outside of your presence during part of that break. So we'll probably have you returning for further evidence, hopefully around 1:30. And if we do that, I'll also inquire as to whether or not you think we could just go through 2 hours without an afternoon break, potentially, if we start up around 1:30. So.
And I believe the state can do so as long as the jurors are good with it.
Okay, I'll ask the jurors once you return back, so we kind of know what is left in the afternoon after that. So we will go ahead and take our lunch recess at this time. I'll have the jurors be excused, and we'll argue a brief motion after they've been excused from the courtroom.
All right.
Okay, let's listen for this motion that they're going to argue. And then I may stop the stream after the motion since they're going to take a longer. Oh, good, Stacy. Since they're going to take a longer lunch break, I may do an afternoon stream for the afternoon portion, but I'll make a decision after we hear this motion and see how long it goes. But yeah, the DBT therapy that I had, it was pretty expensive for me because I didn't
All right, thank you. Please be seated.
insurance at the time that covered that, but it was well worth it.
For those in the courtroom in attendance, you're welcome to stay for a motion hearing. You're also welcome to leave for the lunch break if you'd prefer to do that. It's a motion that we're going to just hear an argument at this time, whether or not it will be open or closed hearing. So if anybody does want to leave for the lunch break, you're welcome to. Otherwise, we'll proceed under this rule 32. Awesome. Thank you. We'll have the witness step down and return too. Sorry, I lost track of you still sitting up there.
Oh, that's funny. The witness is still sitting there waiting to be excused. The witness is like, am I going to be questioned as part of this motion? It's sort
All
of
right, counsel, we've got a motion in limine that was filed on April 15th by the state. It was filed on shortened notice just yesterday. I haven't expected defense counsel to be able to have time to make any filing in response. However, I've allowed Mr. Pryor an opportunity to review the motion and would permit oral argument. That hearing we're going to take up later after our lunch break. The question right now is the state did file this with a request for an expedited hearing, which I'm granting and having that heard on the merits today. Also under a motion requesting that the motion in limine be sealed. The court is holding a hearing at this time to determine on the state's motion whether or not the hearing will be sealed or will it be open. And so that's governed by our Idaho Court Administrative Rules 32. If the state wants to present any argument as to a basis for sealing the hearing this afternoon, I'll hear that at this time, and then I'll hear a response from the defense. So who is going to be arguing as to the motion to seal?
I will be, Your Honor.
Go ahead, Ms. Blake. And so to be clear, not into the merits of the motion in limine, just on the issue of sealing.
Correct. The state did file a brief. I recognize this is short timing and defense counsel may not have had an opportunity to do the same. In the brief, I think both in the motion to seal and then reference to the brief without getting into any argument lays out what the state's concern is depending on any ruling on the motion is why the state had requested that this be filed under seal. Depending on the outcome could have an impact in the future, but we do recognize that there is a jury that has been seated at this point and the court may determine that that is no longer a concern. So we would simply defer to the court on this and just reference back to the motion as to the state's rationale for the original request.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Blake. What's the defense response as to the issue of sealing or not sealing the upcoming hearing?
Judge, the state correctly pointed out that the jury's been sworn in. The evidence is has proceeded at this point. Without getting into too many factual issues, Judge, the information that's in question was listed as an exhibit and disclosed to the state on March 15th, I believe, originally in the list of exhibits and identified on that date. Then it was provided to them just before the start, a week, I think, before the start of the opening statements with the actual copy of that. So 3 weeks later now we're dealing with this. But just so everybody's clear, Judge, the information that I'm intending to use is going to be limited to impeachment. And as we all are aware, that if the information is used for impeachment, it's not necessarily admitted as evidence, but in all fairness to the state, it was provided as an exhibit. But the defense's intention is to use this solely for impeachment evidence.
All right.
So I would expect that this is nothing that needs to be sealed.
Okay, well, the court in this case has previously many times sealed certain issues relating to evidence, mostly under Idaho Court Administrative Rule 32, which is a long rule with a lot of subparts. Somewhere among in there is a paragraph E, which is kind of a catch-all that indicates that things can be sealed if it's necessary to temporarily seal or redact documents to preserve the right to a fair trial. And in this case, of course, we had quite an ordeal and undertaking to find jurors who were not prejudiced by pretrial publicity, and pretrial publicity all seemingly tilted one way in the case, where many hundreds of potential jurors were unable to serve in this case because they already had a opinion that the defendant was guilty. So avoiding that and trying to get a fair and impartial jury led to the court's orders many times before on that very issue. The issue now, where the companion case has already gone through trial, and now we have a jury seated in this case and impaneled, my concern is alleviated as to picking jurors that are not predisposed to a opinion in the case based on pretrial publicity. And so without that concern going forward, the court will determine that the hearing does not need to be sealed. And so under Rule 34, the temporarily unsealed or temporarily sealed motion will be unsealed, as well as the hearing will be conducted in an open hearing today. When we argue that motion, counsel, I don't expect it will take too long to argue, but I indicated to the jurors they'd be back around 1:30 to start evidence again. So if we call the motion at about 5 or 10 after to give us a full hour for lunch and court preparations, is that time frame going to work for the state?
That will work for the state, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. And will you be arguing that, Ms. Blake?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. All right, Ms. Pryor.
And I'll be arguing it for the defense judge.
I understand that.
Okay, y'all. So that was really, they were just talking about sealing the motion and whether they wanted to make the audience aware of this particular motion. Not super duper interesting to us. So I'm going to go ahead and end this stream. Thank you all for visiting with me here. I really do enjoy talking with you all during these trials, and appreciate you being here. And I have already gone ahead and scheduled my afternoon stream. So be sure to look out for that. And at around 1:30 Mountain Time, we will start back up. And so that's in about an hour and a half from now. And also if you have any sort of mental illness or mental health instability that involves anxiety, panic attacks, fight, flight, freeze in day by day situations, these panic attacks coming on when you least expect them or least want them to happen, DBT is a very, very good therapy for you, because you don't have to wait and bottle everything up until you have your appointment with your therapist. You are given the tools to use to deal with it. And while you are in the course of therapy for about 6 weeks, you have the opportunity to call your therapist at any time when you're going through a crisis and you need them to help you get through it in the moment. And that teaches you how to get through it in the moment in the future without that crutch. And it doesn't take away from talk therapy if it helps you, but talk therapy doesn't help you in the moment when you are experiencing that that panic attack. And I used to think panic attacks looked like the kind that they showed on The Sopranos, where you all of a sudden feel like you're having a heart attack and you faint. My panic attacks look like this: me just bawling my head off, me crying out of fear, me feeling panic about something and feeling very fearful and crying and feeling helpless and afraid and not sure what to do next. That's what a panic attack looks like on me. And I always, and some people in the mental health community call that a emotional flashback. They call that an emotional flashback. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard me recommend the book called The Body Keeps the Score. The Body Keeps the Score helps explain to you why you have emotional flashbacks. And that is because your body remembers, even if your brain doesn't give you a picture of that memory when you're experiencing it, your body holds the feeling of that memory. It holds the feeling and it presents that feeling to you whenever you come near something that is similar to that traumatic situation. And it makes you feel like, hyperventilating is a big thing too. And sometimes I even gag. I get like a gag reflex, and and I like to eat. I like to eat. I'm not a tiny petite woman, but when I'm experiencing that kind of feeling, I can't eat. I can't eat. And so and it is incredibly debilitating, because it's hard to get through a day, when you're supposed to be on your game at work or with your kids or with your spouse, and you have no control over when a trigger comes up, right? You have no control over the fact that when your husband says a word like, let's see, pig. Let's say your spouse just says the word pig, right? And that gets to you. It might be from your childhood, but you don't remember it. But every time he says pig, you get a horrible feeling, and you might snap back and not know why. It teaches you how to put all of those types of things in the proper context. Yep. So like the only time the times that I've lost the most weight in my life was when people died that I loved. Yeah, gosh. I used to have a workbook, but I had to clean out the workbooks are actually huge. They're big. You pay a lot for these workbooks, and they are huge. And I used to lug it around with me, but after a while I stopped lugging it around because it was just so voluminous. Yeah, mental health talk streams. Hey, I'm more than happy to have a mental health talk stream. The only issue I see with that, Harlot, is that I am not a therapist, and I don't want to give off the impression that I'm, giving therapy, because I'm not. I'm just relaying my experience with different types of therapies. I've had CBT, I've had DBT, I've had EMDR, and it just so happens that the one that really helped me was DBT. So I really do appreciate you all being here, and I will appreciate seeing you later when we start up the stream again for the afternoon session of this trial. I will also give Yeah, me too, Evil Queen. Um, I hate death. I hate death. And that's one thing that I've had to radically accept because we can't change the fact that people die. That every human being is going to die at some point. And when my mom died, I thought that I was experiencing more pain than anybody in the entire world. But I knew that couldn't be the fact because everybody has family die. Everybody has family die, right? Everyone loses people. But I felt like I was the most burdened by my mother's death. And yeah, same here, Harlot. I was around 43, 44 when my mom died, and I lost my shit. The world fell out from under my feet. It was, and again, I knew logically and reasonably that people lose family members all the time. But emotionally, I was like, how do people live through this? I was in more pain than I'd ever felt, even when I got divorced. Yeah, that's we all find ways of, dealing with things in our mind, So yeah, I'll try to think about a good way to have a mental health stream without being reckless and dangerous with people because again, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a doctor. I just have experience. And I do think it's valuable to share our experience, right? For others because, it's just everyday people sharing their everyday experiences with therapy and what helped them. Some people have more experience than others. I happen to have a great deal of experience. But I also want people to know that there are methods available to them and there's different ways of thinking about mental health and mental illness. And there are even big fights in the mental health community about how to treat it, how to recognize it, how to diagnose it, all of that. It's very complicated. Oh man, oh my God, on your 33rd birthday, Harlot. Oh my God. Oh my God, that kills me. On your birthday? So every birthday for you is a reminder of that. That really bothers me. Uh, that bothers me for you a lot. I have tears coming to my eyes for you, Harlot. Yep, I agree, Johnny. Here's what I found about YouTube and doing streams and all this stuff. Oh gosh, Harlot, I'm so sorry. That just sucks, man. That I cannot it really hurts me for you. It does. That your birthday has to. No, don't feel sorry for me. I feel sorry that happened to you. I really do. So here's the thing with I try to do streams like, helpful streams, teaching streams, I do my reality check streams. And what you'll probably notice if you go on my other channel is that unless I name a specific person or a specific case, not as many people will pay attention. If I say, hey, everybody, let's talk about mental health. My core audience might show up. You guys might show up to talk to me about it. And that's amazing. And I love that. But what I've noticed is that more people, unfortunately, pay attention when I say, "Hey, let's talk about, like, just for the sake of this discussion, let's talk about Lana's mental health." They more people want to hear about other people, and I hate that about YouTube. I hate it. So I'm constantly in this decision making mode of, well, do I want more people to see the information, or am I okay with less people seeing the information and not using specific names? It does. It sucks. It just sucks. Yeah. Yeah. If I just say, let's talk about mental health, I'll have, 30 in chat. If I say, let's talk about, mental health and Sebastian Rogers, I'll have 1,000. You know what I'm saying? And I hate that. I really hate it. Because and people are hoping that, I don't know, and it's about what's trending, and me too, Johnny. Me too. Oh my gosh, Solo. That's awful. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Let's talk about the conspiracy of mental health around the Sebastian Rogers case, right? I mean, if I said that, there would be 100,000 more people in chat. I'm kidding, but you know what I'm saying? But if I just let's talk about conspiracy. I have done this. I've, tried to talk about, how the internet loves conspiracies and given examples of that. I've talked about, like, I have a video on my channel about corruption and true crime, and it got a decent amount of views, but not as many views as me, giving updates on frickin' Lana, right? So I have to weave those mental health information and messages about the internet in with these, updates about Lana or other creators who are pulling fuck shit. And I hate that about YouTube. I really, really do. Yeah. It is an insult toward victims. It is. But I will say the media was like that when I was working at Apple and Google and Twitter, and I would work with the media. They would come to me and say, "Hey, we want to put Steve Jobs on the cover of Time." And we would talk about it internally, and we'd say, "Hey, let's try to get more people on the cover of Time than just Steve Jobs. Let's try to get a team of people on the cover of Time with Steve Jobs," right? And Time would say, "No, no, 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 no. We rarely put multiple people on the cover. It needs to be one person. It's one person. People won't buy the magazine if it's more than one person on the cover." So this is not just a social media thing, but it's more diabolical on social media. So anyway, all right, I'll get off my soapbox now. Yeah. I'll never stop talking about mental illness either. Unfortunately, we have to weave it into discussions about, trending topics, or people simply won't hear it because the algorithm won't share the video unless it's trending. See what I mean? That wasn't my murder-mobile joke, Johnny. That was actually Paul Gilmartin's murder-mobile joke. He's the one that said, "Was it a murder-mobile?" Oh, yeah. Anyway. It was funny. It was funny. And then when Lana played that whole interview, she thought we were being distasteful for laughing about the murder mobile. Okay, let me get this straight. I talk about my experience ending up when I'm 16 years old in a car in a murder mobile. And that's offensive to you, and the fact that we're laughing about it is offensive to you, but you do shit like this.
Just for you, panty dropper. We'll play it for you. Bring up your tight fucking panty wannies up in this motherfucker. Now take your panties and fucking eat them. Take your panties, Lynn. When called out, these sniff them. Oh, triggered? Lynn DeBris, take a shit in your fucking pants. When's your birthday, Lynn? I want to send you a present. You know what the present's gonna be? A vibrator. Come on, Lynn, let me fill you up.
And since that wasn't enough, okay, I'm laughing about the murder mobile, and you're talking about sending me a vibrator for my birthday, and you got a protection order on somebody because they may have sent you a glitter dick bomb. Oh my God. Oh, is this real life? No, it's not. It's the internet. All right, you guys. I will see you in a little over an hour. Talk to you later. Thanks for being here. Hit the thumbs up. Bye.